Hello and welcome to Six Part. Today I'm gonna continue the series What If Deku Had an Amphibian Girlfriend Part 2. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a big thumbs up, and to watch more videos like this, subscribe to my channel and turn that bell notification on so you never miss an upload. Now wasting no more time, let's begin.
Izuku stayed sad and stared at his food thoughtfully after learning that someone had gotten past school security. His thoughts was filled with that terrible nightmare once more, as though it were going to come true. When he saw the bodies of students all over the place and his girlfriend in peril from the strong but enigmatic villain, he told her to save himself and shoved her aside, but the villain killed them both. He won't do her any harm. Furious, he thought, I'll protect her, I won't let anything happen to her. Unknowingly, his body was producing one for all. He got to his feet quickly and without fracturing any bones. The fact that he had to get Sue to safety right now didn't bother him. Asui was worried as he looked at her gravely. Deku? Are you ribbit? Her pal blushed profusely when her boyfriend shocked her by holding her up bridal style. Cutting her off, he asks, Deku, what are you? I'll protect you, Asui. His voice had a trace of rage. As he saw the other students rushing down the corridors to get out, he began to dash out of the cafeteria. Except for Izuku, who keeps moving so quickly that neither Asui nor any of the students can see him. Everyone in the hallways was slamming into one another as they attempted to exit. Shortly afterward, he saw a door open. He thought, safety, and took the risk of running to it. They knew it was a janitor closet once they got inside. These closets are often quite small, but this one was large enough to accommodate 8 people. Before long, Izuku set Asui down to shut the door. As she was doing it, Suyu gave him a frightened but agitated expression. The reason for both was that she felt Izuku's powerful arms on her body and that he was protecting her by picking her up easily. However, she consoled Midoriya after shaking the emotion from her mind. Ribbit, Deku honey, it's okay. He turned away from her, putting her behind him as he faced the door, prepared for anything, even though she was holding his hand. He yelled angrily, don't worry, I will not lose you. I won't. His body was starting to glow once more. Asui gasped and encircled him in her arms, keeping him near her. He didn't turn or answer when she said, Deku, please, you need to calm down, there's no danger in school. She begged, fearing that if he continued, he may break his bones again or worse, do irreversible harm. While you were carrying me, I only caught a glimpse of the media outside. Please, she said. He remained in a combat stance, ready for whoever came to the door, and kept his eyes on it. And then he heard sniffling. I need to protect her. No matter the cost, he thought. Out of his reverie, he looked perplexed before turning to gaze behind him and yelling when he saw Asui sobbing and holding him close. The light surrounding his body dimmed slightly as he shook his head and said, Asui, what's wrong? He murmured, seeking to gaze around. How did we get here? He asks, lowering himself to Suyu's level and using his thumb to wipe away her tears as he holds her cheek in his hand. Surprised and no longer crying, she replies, You don't remember? Midoriya gave a headshake. He hugs her after saying, No. I don't remember. All I can remember is the nightmare. His eyes threatened to well up with tears as he held Asui close to him. All I can think of is keeping you safe. I can't lose you, Asui. I just can't. She could feel his heart pounding rapidly in the embrace right now, and she could still see the one for all light on his body. She gradually put her arms around him, giving him a tight hug and nestling onto his chest. I'm right here. I'm safe, don't worry. She smiles at him as she glances up. She slowly leans in near to him, and he smiles as he leans in close to her, saying, I love you, my Deku. Astonished by the name, Asui croaked, I love you too. My Froppy. She liked the term and thought, Froppy, but was interrupted when she felt his lips on hers. She started kissing him back after realizing he was kissing her. She groans as Izuku lifts her right leg over his hips and clamps her against the wall. She carefully curled her tongue around his, tasting his saliva and vice versa. Her cheeks flushed as she said, Ribbit. Deku. He was back to normal now that One for All had calmed down in his system. With notice from Sue. She smiled till she could feel Izuku's body slowly shifting up and down against her body. She quickly realized that he was dry humping her. Wait. She croaked as she felt his knee slide across her skirt, pushing against her pussy and the material of her underwear. Ah, Ribbit. Ribbit. She exclaimed as she started to get wet, and Izuku felt the same. He grinned and held her tight while dry humping her a little quicker. He was startled when Sue abruptly stopped him as he was reaching slowly for her skirt and ready to pull them down. After saying, it's not the right time, she gestured to the door. They did so after Tenya Iida said, also, listen. Listen up, everyone. Everything is going to be okay. It's just the media outside. There's nothing to be alarmed about. He then began to shout. We're UA students. We need to remain calm and prove we're the best of the best. Izuku yelled as he withdrew from Tsuyu after they had finished hearing Iida's yell. He turned aside, his face flushed from the realization of his actions. He looked guilty as he apologized, saying, I'm so sorry. I don't know what got over me. Sorry. Tsuyu was still feeling damp down there, so she stood there blushing. She wanted to go on, but she knew they couldn't since anyone may interrupt them at any time. To grab his attention, she approaches him and takes his hand in hers. Hey, it's okay. We can continue after school, in our new apartment, okay? It wasn't your fault, she reassured him. Izuku smiles as she puts a finger to her cheek and sticks her tongue out in an adorable fashion, saying, at least you're feeling better. Ribbit. He said with a nod, hee, why yeah. Then Asui nodded and croaked in agreement, saying, okay. Let's go before anyone notices we're gone. After that, they exit the closet and immediately return to class because lunch has ended. Later on in Class 1A, the cops removed the journalists for trespassing on UA once the class returned to their homeroom. Izuku and Momo stood before the class property. It's time, class rep, Momo said as she stood by Izuku. As he looked at everyone in front of him, the aforementioned child, still trembling with anxiety, murmured, let's begin. He paused for a second before continuing, okay, so we need to figure out who the other class officers will be. She turned to face Tsuyu, who grinned back at her before inhaling deeply. Everybody, even Yaoyorozu, took notice when he said, but first, there's something that I want to say. All eyes were on him as he went on. Everyone was taken aback as he exclaimed, I've thought a lot about this. And I think that Tenya Iida should be our class rep. Even Asui croaked in bewilderment, but no one was as startled as Iida, who gasped. He was able to capture everyone's attention and get us in line during the security breach, Midoriya says. His smile is heroic. So I believe that he should be the one leading our class from now on, he says. After finishing, there was a brief pause before Sue spoke. They gaze at her. Midoriya's right, they say. Yeah, Ochako said in agreement as she grinned and tapped her chin once. Iida should lead our class. He did take charge while we were crowded in the halls. Before long, more people began to concur. Kirishima said to the others, you know, if they vouch for Iida as class rep, I'm good. Kaminari nodded. To Iida's amazement, he asked his classmates, you said it, and did anyone see how Iida looked like the figure in the emergency exit sign earlier? They all continued to concur. He turns to face Izuku, who nods in agreement. This is a waste of time. When Aizawa emerged from behind his desk, still in his sleeping bag, almost everyone, but Izuku in particular, startled out of their skin. Most of them must have forgotten he was back there. He then lay back on the firm ground and fell back asleep, saying, I don't care who the rep is, just hurry up. Iida got up from his chair and looked serious. The class smiled as he declared, if Midoriya is nominating me for this job, then I humbly accept. I pledge to carry out the duties of class rep to the best of my abilities. Calling Iida by her nickname, Kirishima said, sounds good emergency exit. Kaminari yelled, emergency exit Iida, don't let us down man. Momo sighed, feeling excluded as others started to support Iida. Knowing they wouldn't listen, she said softly, hello. I got 2 more votes than him. Even the principal was analyzing the barrier, which has been reduced to nothing by rust and scrap metal, while some of the instructors were outside, questioning whether it was a declaration of war or a display of power. Later on in the day, every member of Class 1A was waiting for their bus to arrive outside the school in their superhero costumes after being informed of their activities for the day. For some reason, the symbol of peace wasn't arrived yet, but they still planned to undertake some rescue training with Aizawa and All Might. Izuku sighed and sat down on the bench to mend his shoe, which had a loose lace. He felt someone sit next to him once he was done, and when he looked, he saw it was his girlfriend. Izuku blushed scarlet as she smiled at him while sticking her tongue out. Wearing her superhero suit, she had an adorable appearance. In an attempt to relax, he tried to focus on her face, but he found it difficult to avoid staring at her body because her costume hugged every curve, particularly her chest. Asui blushed and leaned down to whisper to her boyfriend, Hi, Deku. Ribbit. Hi Asui. Midoriya returned the whisper, laughing uneasily as her breasts now pressed against his arm. He blushed as he felt their warmth and softness through the costume. Someone cried out to them before they could continue. Midoriya? Sue. They turned to see Ochako waving and grinning as he approaches them. She saw that Izuku was not wearing his costume when she arrived at them. She questioned Izuku, and the two greeted her, Uraraka. She gestures to the garments and asks, "Why are you wearing your PE clothes?" He was going to tell her, but Suyu beat him to it. "Where's your costume?" she asks bewilderedly. She turns to face Deku, who nods, and says, "You saw it after the combat training. It was kinda trashed." She then glares at Bakugo after stating that. She turns back to Uraraka, still furious with him for injuring Izuku. He's still waiting on the support company to fix it up. "Oh okay." Ochako nodded before she asked. Izuku asks Asui, "What about your goggles, Sue?" Observing that she had just taken off her goggles. Suyu responded while putting a finger to her cheek. As she looks up and touches the top of her head where the goggles would be, she says, "Ribbit. Since it's only rescue training, we're probably going to be swimming in freshwater. I really don't need it since we won't be in murky or saltwater." Ochako smiled at that. They say, "Oh, I guess that makes sense." Then they hear a whistle close by. They can see that Iida was the source of it, as he held a whistle to his mouth before taking it away. The bus had barely arrived when he yelled, "Gather around Class 1A. Using your student numbers, form 2 neat lines so we can load the bus efficiently." Everyone seems a little uneasy when Iida blows the whistle once more. Izuku smiles as he observes Asui and Uraraka. He laughed and got a nod from both of them, including a croak from Sue, saying, "Iida's kicking it into high gear as our class red huh? Ribbit." They then began boarding the bus with the rest of their class. Iida, who was pouting in the seat he chose, said in disappointment a few moments after entering. He sighed in defeat before Mina consoled him by giving him a pat on the shoulder. "The bus open layout ruined my boarding strategy. You really need to chill, Iida." Suyu, who was walking by, grabbed Izuku's hand and unexpectedly pulled him into the back of the bus before he could sit close to Sato. Fortunately, nobody saw or paid heed because they were still boarding the bus. The green-haired lovers grinned at one another while seated at the rear, where just their heads were visible. Izuku told his fiancée copywritee, who croaked and nodded, "This spot's better." "Ribbit." "It is." She quickly recalled her lunchtime experiences, including the events involving her partner. She started to lose her smile. "Deku." She nudged. Before she can say anything more, Midoriya puts a hand on her shoulder to attract her attention. "Are you okay? After what happened during lunch you..." He smiled and muttered, "I'm okay, Asui. I'm not sure what happened or how I made it work, but my body is still intact, don't worry." When he was done, Asui's smile came back, and she blushed and croaked in surprise when he put his arm over her hip and held her. After exchanging glances, they leaned in to kiss but stopped as they heard a greeting. "Hi, guys." The two watch as their friend Ochako approaches and takes a seat in front of them, beaming at them. Midoriya said, "Hey, Uraraka." Sue sighed quietly. She hoped no one sat in front of them, but she wasn't irritated. Since Uraraka is their buddy, she assumed it was okay even if she wanted some privacy with her Deku. She croaked and smiled as she said, "Hi, Ribbit." They soon noticed that several of their classmates are seated close by, on the other side of the 3 from the plastic walls. On the way to their training, they were a little silent, but Ochako soon broke the ice. "Hey, Midoriya." He and Sue both glanced at her. Uraraka queried him, looking a little worried. She grinned and made Midoriya jump a little. "That power of yours. Isn't it a lot like All Might?" she asked. "Oh, you really think so? I never thought about that," he said, looking away anxiously as he tried to think of something. Kirishima started to point out the difference, but Asui explained it first. She sighed and tapped her cheek. The gravity girl in their class remembered this when she said, "Wait, Ochako, All Might quirk doesn't severely hurt him. Remember our last training?" Thanks to his her, Izuku exhaled with relief. "That makes a big difference. Ribbit." A murmur came from Ijiro, "Beat me to it." Fortunately, Uraraka believed the two lies. As Kirishima spoke to Midoriya, she continued to smile and remarked, "Oh, that's true. Still, I bet it's cool to have a simple augmenting type quirk." He laughed. He held his arm up and looked at it while hardening it. "You can do a lot of flashy stuff with it," he said. "My hardening is super strong and can destroy bad guys in a fight, but it doesn't look all that impressive." But Izuku had a different idea. Eijiro appeared taken aback and said, "Oh no way, I think it's really awesome looking." Kirishima smiled when she heard, "You're definitely pro material with a quirk like that." "You really think so? Seems like it'll be easier to be a popular hero if I had something flashier." Deku grinned as he saw that everyone was beginning to enjoy themselves while conversing, including Yuga. Mina then informs him, "My quirk is a perfect blend of pizzazz and strength. But it's lame if it gives you a stomachache." Aoyama's face turned slightly blue as he turned to face Ashido. Bakugo turned away from Kirishima as she stared at Izuku, saying, "If anyone in our class has a pro quirk it's you, Todoroki, and Bakugo." Uraraka struck a chord with Bakugo when she concluded, saying, "Sure, but with that temper Bakugo has, he probably won't be that popular." He shouted and grasped the rail in front of him. "What did you say? I'll kick your ass." Kaminari yells at her before telling the scoundrel, "You know, we all just met you. So it kinda tells us your personality is flaming crap mixed with hot garbage. You'll regret the day you applied for this school, loser." Izuku continues, glancing back at Asui and observing that she hasn't spoken. It didn't take long to realize that she was dejectedly staring at her legs. This worried him. Remembering not to use her last name in front of their students, he started, Sue. She gazed at him blankly. "Are you okay? What's wrong?" Until he took her gloved hand in his, causing her to croak in surprise. He grinned at her and said, looking him in the eyes, "It's okay to tell me what's wrong." After he was done, Suyu paused to reflect before turning to face the window. He nodded, growing anxious. "Do you remember the first day we met?" he asked. She looked at Izuku, who was now taken aback, and said, "Ever wonder why I keep visiting you every day?" At the beach where they originally met, Suyu paid him a daily visit, but he couldn't remember why. He did ponder the reason. Then he anxiously waved his hands in front of his body and said, "Why yeah. I wanted to ask you, why were you visiting me?" Red in the face, he muttered, "I mean, don't get me wrong, I love that you visit me. I love that I had someone to talk to." With a finger on her cheek, Asui glances at him before continuing. She croaked in sorrow, startling Midoriya. "Well, the reason I keep visiting you because I never had friends at my junior high." Rewind. She was gathering items from her locker at Asui's junior high, such as a scarf, a sweater, and a purse. It was rather cold outside at the time, and since Suyu's quirk is that of a frog, she wraps her scarf around her neck and puts on her sweater to cover the majority of her face and body. With a sigh, she heads to the exit down the corridor while listening to other students disparage her in an unflattering manner. What a weirdo. She is frog after all, and she always leaves early. Asui heard such comments with sadness, but she did not show it. As she left the school and headed for the city to go home, she croaked in grief. She saw a store with TVs on display from the glass window along the sidewalk. The news showed All Might defeating the sludge villain and saving 2 children, a blonde and a greenhead. She noticed the second boy, who was being yelled at by 2 heroes, and could see that he was embarrassed. With a clear view of the boy's face on the screen, Suyu thought, "He looks sad. I wonder why." When she realized what she had thought, she shook her head and left the store to go home. "He looks cute. Ribbit. No erotic thoughts, I don't even know him." Several days later, Sue carried her luggage as she strolled along the beach on this warm day. She sighed as she surveyed the trash all around her while sporting white sneakers, black shorts, and a blue t-shirt. She doesn't understand why rubbish is dumped on the beach. She sets her suitcase aside and perches on her hands while gazing out at the ocean sunset. Asui didn't really have any friends. The majority of her classmates either avoided her or called her the frog freak. She's accustomed to it, but it still aches. Because she doesn't want to worry them or appear weak, she hasn't told her parents. Gazing at the accumulation of sand, she lets out a sigh. Ribbit, ribbit. She started to cry when she heard those croaks, but then she heard a loud yell from the other side of the mountain garbage. She gasps and wipes away her tears as she turns to face the source of the sound. She asked herself, "Is someone here?" and then leapt high, landing close to a wrecked automobile. She sneaks inside and peers out a broken window to see a teenager in light green slacks and a white t-shirt standing next to a man who nearly looks like a skeleton, asking him to keep moving a large box that is wearing the boy out. Suyu looked at him and let out a gasp. She said to herself, "Wait, isn't that," after noticing the green hair, "he's from the sludge villain on the news. What is he doing here with that guy?" She stealthily leaves, gets her belongings, and leaves for home so she won't be discovered spying on the two. The following day, returning to the shore, Suyu checked to make sure no one was there. She sighs in relief when she realizes it's only her and gets up to gaze at the sunset once more, wondering if the lad is present. She glances down a bit and then at the ocean, thinking he's not. She heard a male voice yell just as she was ready to jump in and take a quick swim. Ouch. Asui started, Croaking in surprise. Wait, he's still here? She asks as she boards some garbage nearby and looks up to find the green-haired teenager lying on the ground, panting heavily. Talking to himself, he panted, that really hurt. Upon closer inspection, she saw that a tire mark covered his arm, suggesting that a wheel had accidentally fallen on him. Despite her best efforts, Sue was unable to assist him. She worries that he could tease her about her quirk as soon as he sees her. Unaware that the lad sat down on the opposite side of the garbage wall, likewise oblivious to her, Asui lets out a sigh and grips her legs in sorrow as she sits behind the junk pile. Sue's head perks up and stares at the top of the pile above where the voice is coming from, saying, "Well, at least no one's here to make fun of me." He keeps saying to himself, "Most of my classmates are mean to me. Or just ignore me entirely." Unaware that Asui was listening, he hints at sadness in his voice as he says, "It's the worst. I don't have anyone in school to talk to. I don't even have friends." Hearing this startled her. He doesn't have any friends? She gives her chin a tap. Before realizing that the sun was lowering, she asked herself, like me? With that final thought of the day, she stealthily leaves. "I'll come back tomorrow." Day 2. Asui was leaving her junior high school in her sweater, going home to change, and intending to speak with that boy at the beach today, that is, if she had the guts to do so. She was pushed as she turned to go down the sidewalk, croaking in surprise. As she clings to the tree she was shoved into, Suyu discovers it was a school bully who had the quirk known as Valkyrie Wings. "What are you doing leaving school early, ya freak? Heading back to your little pond or something?" Asui opened her mouth to speak, when a voice interrupted. Suyu and the bully turned to see another female student in the school's standard female uniform and said, "Leave her alone." Her head resembled that of a gray-patterned snake, her eyes were yellow with slit pupils, and her hair was red and spiky, reaching her shoulder, yet her body from the neck down appeared human with fair skin. The bully looked straight into her eyes and mocked. "Oh, and what are you going to do about HGH?" The bully felt herself go limp, and the weight of her metal wings caused her to fall back first. "I can't move." Asui, who was also paralyzed, was run towards by the snake girl, who took her hand and put her on her back before fleeing. "Hey!" The bully's body is still numb, so she tries to stand up but is unable. "Grr. How long does this last?" The snake pupil puts Suyu down on her feet after they are safely apart and the quirk has worn off. As Sue nods, the student asks, "Are you okay?" with a worried expression. She glanced at the kid and saw that she was the one that would follow her about school and occasionally immobilize her with her quirk. "I am. Thank you." Was it paralysis? Even before learning that the snake girl was lonely herself, similar to her but because of her snake look, Sue was unfazed by this, although other students might have been frightened by it. Asui extends a hand to her after realizing the chance and gathering the bravery to become friends. With a brief glance at her hand, the pupil says, "Suyu Asui. But please, call me Sue." Then, with a slight smile on her face, she shakes Sue's hand and says, "Habuko Mongoose." As they stroll together and strike up a discussion, Suyu smiled and Habuko smiled as well. "But please, feel free to call me Habuko or Mongoose, I'm good with either one." Mongoose nodded to Sue and asked, "What did you do to defend me? Was that your quirk? Also, why save me?" She replied, "It allows me to paralyze anyone that stares directly into my eyes," hissing slightly as she used the word stares. She then clenches her fist and says, "Normally, it lasts 3 seconds, but I've managed to make it last a bit longer than that. As for saving you." She thought about that bully, who was making fun of her. Rakaparat Kant had bullied me before. Habuko gives Suyu a glance. Asui couldn't help but smile and say, "I couldn't stand there and let her hurt you as she almost did to me." They carried on this quiet chat down the sidewalk until they came to a T intersection, where turning left would take them to the ocean and continuing straight would take them home. "It was good that you showed up in time to stop her." As they arrived, Mongoose saw that Asui had halted his stride. She asks as she examines her gazing down at the distant beach. The aforementioned girl croaked and turned to face her. "Sue. Sorry, Habuko, I was distracted." Habuko understood Suyu's motivation for staring at the shore, even if she would have been unaware. Mongoose had been following her unnoticed lately when she saw her spying on this green-haired youngster from the sludge villain incident who had been clearing trash from the beach lately under the guidance of a skeleton man. Suyu croaked in astonishment and then turned away, blushing, before responding, "Is it about that kid with green hair? Ribbit. Yes. I'm planning to go there later to see if he'll show up." The redhead seemed a little more interested when that was mentioned. You're going to talk to him? Asui's face turned redder and she froze a little at the inquiry. She goes on, maybe. I'm not sure. She sighed silently and closed her eyes as she looked down. I want to, after overhearing him say he doesn't have friends at his school. But at the same time, I don't. I feel like he'll run off when he sees me. I'm not sure what to do, she said, attempting to decide whether or not to speak with him when she felt a hand brush over her shoulder. She turns to realize that Habuko was the one who had been observing her before he spoke. You should go talk to him. Ribbit! Asui exclaimed in shock. When she asked, Mongoose nodded and said, really? He seems like a nice guy. And he doesn't look like the type that'll run away at first glance. Habuko continues. Just go up and greet him. Start up a conversation and see if he needs help clearing the beach from waste. Tsuyu asked her after she had stopped. Habuko didn't take long to respond to the question, is there anything else I should do? After saying, let him know you were aware of him the times you've gone to the beach. Offer him a snack in case he's hungry. She smiles at Asui and offers her final piece of advice. And don't be afraid to show him who you are. Just be yourself, Su. Huh. Habuko was shocked when Tsuyu embraced her. Thank you. Friend. When Habuko heard that phrase and Asui's embrace, he felt a little pleased. There was a pause, and then the snake girl raised her hands and gave Su a hug in return. You're welcome, she said, smiling as her astonished face subsided. Friend. After exchanging hugs, the two kept walking down the sidewalk and made their separate ways home, promising to see one another again soon. Later on in the day, Asui, dressed for summer, was carrying a bag of snacks as she walked on the beach's sand. She was carrying them for the green-haired teenager she had spotted on her beach visits. Speaking of which, she can see him breathing heavily and without a shirt at the moment. Tsuyu smiled and blushed slightly at the sight of his muscles, but she quickly shook it off and took a big breath to help him relax. She thought to herself, talk to him, Su. Just go and talk to him, Ribbit. When she got close to him, he turned to face her and waved while closing his eyes. When he opened his eyes and realized it wasn't the person he had anticipated seeing, he halted in the middle of his statement. Oh, hi Al. Hi there. Ribbit. Su smiled and protruded her tongue in greeting. The flashback has ended. That's the reason I kept visiting you every day after we first met. Asui said. She smiles and blushes as she looks at Izuku. I really started to like you as my best friend next to Habuko, and then. Well, she says. As Midoriya looked down at her and put his arms around her, grinning and held her tight, she muttered, we became more than that. A couple. Fortunately for them, nobody was observing or listening to them because Bakugo is still ranting at anyone who make fun of his demeanor. Asui, Izuku spoke first. He kissed her head and muttered back, I had no idea you went through all that. The thing that pained him the most was when others made fun of Asui because of her mutant quirk. He knows how she feels because he experienced the same thing in junior high, but it was much worse because he was quirkless. He was so incensed by this that he wished he had accompanied her to school in order to defend her, particularly in light of the Rakaparad she had brought up. Asui whispers, Deku, calm down. He looks perplexed. He looks as she slowly gestures at his body, and he gasps as he notices that he is glowing just as previously. How is he accomplishing this? Please calm down. Tsuyu asked anxiously. Izuku allowed the illumination to dim once again as he closed his eyes and inhaled deeply. He clenched his fists and murmured, sorry. It's just the way they treated you, with little rage. I wish I could have protected you. He felt a damp hand brush against his cheek, and he screamed in shock. When he looked, he noticed that Tsuyu had her tongue on his face. This made him blush and made him anxious, but he also liked it. Whispering, she retracts her tongue. She smiles and gives him a kiss on the hand. It's okay, Deku. That was in the past, what's important now is that we were together. Ribbit. With a sigh, Izuku restored his smile. Oh okay, you're right. But still, I won't let anyone treat you like that, never, he said gently. He said, you're my girl Asui, that's a promise. She blushed and cradled him in his chest. She croaked, Ribbit Ribbit. Izuku laughed and rubbed her head and hair, but then he remembered something. Holding her close, he said, wait, your friend. What's her name again? Is she friendly? As she looked at him and tapped her finger on her chin. Habuko Mongoose, she provides in response. And yes, she's friendly. She was my only friend at junior high, but I do have some pictures of her on my phone. I can show you later, after training. Izuku smiles at her. Tsuyu glances at him and nods, saying, sure. She must have an amazing quirk then. Yeah, her quirks. Aizawa interrupts them, primarily speaking to Katsuki or those who are shouting. They interrupted everyone and said, "All right, enough messing around. We're here." Asui looked at Deku and sighed, "Yes, sir." He nods to her as the bus stops in front of a large dome building and says, "I'll tell you later." Iida yelled as everyone began to disembark off the bus one by one. The statement, "All right, everyone, please get off in a single line. No rush," made Izuku laugh. He got to his feet and thought, "Yep, he never relaxes." However, Sue pulled him back down so they could kiss. He kissed, then pulled away, shocked. Since everyone was off the bus with their teacher, he attempted to stop her, but she retreated to croak at him. "Hey Asui. Wait. It's okay Deku. They can't see us through the windows, plus we'll have enough time before they realize we're gone." She reassures him. With a seductive tone, she concluded, "I just want for you to kiss me. I want to feel your body on me before we start training, ribbit." Izuku gave her a brief glance before grinning. Tsuyu shocks him with another kiss on the lips, and he kisses her back. His hand comes up and holds one of her breasts, massaging it before putting his index finger in the area where her nipple is, causing Asui to groan as he rubs it. Alright. I guess we could MPH. In the meantime everyone gathered outside the bus, waiting for someone to emerge from the building. Aizawa went on to say, "It will only take a moment before the other professionals arrive." He saw that Asui and Midoriya were absent from the group, primarily because they were the only ones with green hair, so he asked the class, "Wait. Where's Asui?" While some were either perplexed or paid little attention, Ochako silently gasped when he realized they were still on the bus. "We can't proceed until they're here." She gasped when she saw a pro hero arrive as Tenya was ready to check the bus. "Iida look." Uraraka called to him, but he halted before he could see. Before long, he and everyone else outside the bus gasped as they realized it was 13, the space hero. "Hello everyone," said the hero. "I've been waiting for you." The hero's enormous spacesuit made it difficult for them all to tell if 13 was grinning. Ochako broke into a broad smile. She cheered and exclaimed, "Wow! 13 is one of my favorite heroes." Then Uraraka heard the same gasp. She turned and saw Izuku and Tsuyu leaving the bus, Asui croaking a nod to Izuku. "Tsu. Is that the space hero, 13? She exclaimed. With a sigh of relief, Ochako talks to herself in her mind. "Oh good, they're out. That was close." Izuku grinned broadly and exclaimed, "That's the chivalrous pro who saved a ton of people from disasters from across the world." His girlfriend grinned and said, "You're right." 13 goes on. Everyone follows 13 inside, thinking, "I can't wait to show all of you what's inside. This is going to be totally awesome." They all let out a startled cry as they entered the dome. Kirishima said with amazement, "Holy crap. It looks like some kind of amusement park." Before long, 13 enumerated a few of the locations. As 13 was telling everyone about the training facility, Asui was too preoccupied to pay attention to anything but the water surrounding the wreckage. A shipwreck, a landslide, fire, windstorm, etc. She wanted to demonstrate her skill in the water to everyone, including her partner. "Sue?" she asks, croaking as she realizes it's Izuku. "You okay?" he inquired. With concern, he placed a hand on her shoulder and said, "You've been staring off into space." "I'm okay Midoriya," she said, grinning as she nodded. She croaks as she blushes, "I just can't wait to show you how good I am in the water." Izuku blushed and said, "I can't wait." However, Eraserhead stopped them shortly after. The two gasped and turned to face the front when they heard his solemn tone. "Asui, Midoriya, pay attention. Before we begins 13. Let me say one thing. Maybe 2. 3. Probably 4. Mr. Aizawa and the other pupils tell the space hero, rather irritated. 13 says, "We get it," and goes back to work. 13 holds up a palm in front of their face and says, "Listen carefully, I'm sure you're aware that I have a powerful quirk called Black Hole. I can use it to suck up anything and turn it into dust." Izuku said to the pro, and Uraraka couldn't help but nod excitedly. He smiled and said, "Yeah, you've used Black Hole to save people from all kinds of disasters before, right?" 13 said, "That's true," but his tone became solemn. Most of the kids gasped as they lowered their hands and said, "But my quirk could also very easily be used to kill." Tsuyu croaks in astonishment as Izuku grabs her hand out of impulse after hearing it. She stares at him and notices the terror in his eyes. She puts a finger over her mouth and massages his gloved hand slowly to make him relax. "Ribbit?" she asks. She lowered her finger to give him a grin and said, "It's okay Deku, don't be afraid." Izuku nodded and withdrew from his lover. He said, Sorry." Then they turned to face 13, who went on. "Some of you may have a quirk that's also fatal as well. In our superhero society, all quirks are certified and strictly regulated, so we often overlook how safe they can actually be." 13 motions to the students. "Please, don't forget that if you lose focus or make the wrong move during a battle, your powers can harm others. Even if you're trying to do something like rescue someone." 13 is staring at the Eraser hero. Thanks to Eraserhead's test, you have a solid idea about the potential of your own quirks. And because of All Might's training, you've likely experienced how serious your powers can be against other people. The space hero proceeds to explain. "Carry those lessons over this class. Today you will be using your quirks to save innocent lives. You won't be using your quirks to attack enemies or each other, only to help. After all, that's what a hero is all about. Assuring the safety of others." 13 then bows. As Mr. Aizawa sighs, all of the students applaud. "That's all I have to say, thanks for listening." "Right. Now that's over." The sound of lights flickering with a fizz before going out interrupts Aizawa before he can say anything further. Izuku said, "What's going on?" And Tsuyu shook her head, remaining near him so the others wouldn't know. "I don't know." Everyone at the top of the steps was drawn to the fountain in the middle of the USJ, as 13 had previously referred to it, when a purple aura suddenly materialized. "Huh?" Aizawa asks, observing intently as the aura intensifies and a figure emerges from it. A pale hand covered his face, revealing only his silver hair and red eye. The homeroom instructor gasped at this. With the exception of the space hero, who was given the command by Aizawa, they were all perplexed by Shota's yell. "Stay together, don't move." 13. Protect the students. Eijiro asked, glancing down to the middle. "What is that thing?" As everyone looks toward the center, they watch the purple aura expand as several figures emerge from it, resembling a doorway. Tsuyu taps her cheek as if it were a training exercise, but she gasps when she realizes it isn't. She is then confused when she feels Midoriya pull her into his arms. She said, "Ribbit, Deku, first." As soon as she noticed her boyfriend's expression, she stopped saying, "We're in the open, they're going to." As he watches the figures entering through the portal, his face displays a mixture of dread and rage. Kirishima questioned, "Wait, training started already?" Mr. Aizawa yells, "I thought we were recusing people?" He put on his goggles after saying, "Stay back." Most of the students observed. "This is real, those are villains." With the exception of Asui, who discovered the truth when she discovered that no heroes had the ability to transfer others, and Midoriya, who was growing enraged at the sight of villains, everyone gasped in disbelief. He positioned Sue behind him, causing her to cough in surprise. Fortunately, no one is listening because they were too astonished to notice the villains breaking the USJ. "This is so unbelievable," Izuku thought to himself. He clenched his hands and exclaimed, My dreams. They're coming true. No, I'll protect her. I will." They all exclaim as a big, powerful, anthropomorphic avian thing emerges from the portal, standing by the villain with both eyes attached, its brain exposed on his head, and a roguish smile on its face. The portal itself began to take the shape of a humanoid with brilliant yellow eyes and dark purple mist that spoke. The only heroes I see are Eraser and 13. Confusing. According to the schedule we took, All Might is supposed to be here. Aizawa was overheard saying. So you scumbags used the media as a cover-up to sneak into the school. The man with the disembodied hands on his body questioned, "Where is he?" He extends his arms toward the ceiling and says, "We went through all the trouble of bringing so many friends that were so excited to meet him. They want All Might, the symbol of peace." He glances ahead after saying, "I can't believe he's not here. Maybe if we kill some kids he'll come out to play." Shaking Izuku, Asui yelled in a whisper, "Deku! Deku!" in an attempt to grab his attention, but to no avail. She was afraid since his quirk One for All was beginning to glow again, but he was too furious and preoccupied to listen to her. Deku, who was now prepared to do whatever it took to keep Asui and their class safe, thought, "I must protect her." The pupils, including Izuku, who was holding Tsuyu behind him, were trembling once all of the villains had reached the center. Although she is aware that he is being overly protective of her, she is afraid because his strength is beginning to flare up again, and she needs to calm him down before he damages himself again. Kirishima said, "What? Real villains? First." As Momo goes through and asks the space hero questions, he says, "No way, how could so many of them get into a UA facility this secure?" 13 glances at her and the others and asks, 13, Why aren't the alarms going off? The words, "Good question. I'm not sure," caused Yaoyorozu and the others to gasp. Su pulls Deku aside as Shoto identifies the potential cause of the alarms not going off, checking to make sure no one else is observing. Fortunately, nobody is. She holds her gloved hands to her boyfriend's face, forcing him to gaze directly into her eyes. "Deku, please listen to me," she begs. Her voice included a note of sadness, but it didn't work since he was too lost in his thoughts. "Calm down. Everything will be all right. Please." Tears streamed from his eyes in mutters that were constantly repeated in terror, rage, and grief. "I can't lose you. I can't. He was startled out of his reverie by a melancholy croak. He shakes his head and glances at his lover, who is crying. He questioned, "Hey, are you okay?" and was taken aback when Asui gave him a firm embrace. "Deku." She cried softly on his chest as she started. Izuku looks at her in disbelief as he realizes that One for All is making him glow like before, with no scars, bruises, or broken bones. "Please don't scare me like that again. I don't want to lose you." He gradually relaxes, allowing One for All's radiance to fade. He stoops to embrace her while massaging her back. He started, I'm sorry, Asui." Su pulls away to stare at him before he can finish, saying, I don't want to lose you too. I'd never." "Don't worry, Deku," she says with a broad smile. "We'll get out of here safe and sound." "Ribbit." She kisses his cheek, causing him to flush, after making sure their teachers in class aren't watching. "Oh, okay." After checking to make sure no one else is staring at them, he removes his glove and puts his palm on her cheek, causing the blushing Su to croak as she closes her eyes and cuddles in his hand. "Ribbit. Ribbit." He blushed and smiled at the sight. He quickly puts his glove back on, grips Suyu's hand tenderly, and then they return to the group while listening to Aizawa's speech and moving to the far side of the lengthy staircase. 13. Get them out of here and alert the main campus. Then he recalls Todoroki's statement that the villains are obstructing the security system. He looks at his students, particularly the one with the electrical quirk, and says, "Actually, if they were able to block our sensors, then they might be jamming our regular communication too. Kaminari, try using your quirk to contact the school." "Yes, sir." Denki then starts phoning people at UA using his ear gadget. Midoriya glances at his teacher while he does so. Asui looked at his hand gripping hers. Her face flushed a little while Mina and a few of the other females, including Shoto, looked at him suspiciously. "What are you gonna do? You can't fight them on your own," he started telling him. She even caught Uraraka grinning at her, which caused her to turn away and reflect. Hopefully they don't figure out we're lovers because of this. When she hears Midoriya telling Aizawa, she croaks. When he's done, Aizawa turns to face him while wearing goggles and informs him, there are too many of them. Even if you erase their quirks, your fighting style isn't suited for this. Your quirk works as stealth and one-on-one fighting, it won't help. He then turns to face the baddies and says, you can't be a pro if you know one trick. Eraserhead leaps down the steps after saying, I'll leave it to you 13. Izuku, Tsuyu, and the others watched as he battled the group of villains, eliminating each one individually, by using his quirk to cancel out the quirk of those non-mutants. Asui tapped her face and Midoriya could only utter, "W.O." It's amazing how he's holding them off. Ribbit. Izuku smiles. After a short while, Su realized the class was departing and said, I guess I shouldn't have underestimated him. She gasps as she draws Midoriya near to her by his hand. Izuku glances at her and nods, saying, let's go. They all caught up with the group after saying, right. They were close to the gate, ready to go, when Kurogiri, the mist villain who carried all the villains in the USJ, emerged from the dark purple mist that grew in front of them. As Tsuyu shook slightly in terror and Izuku held her in his arms, everyone screamed in surprise. Deku scowled at the villain after sensing it. Kurogiri started, there is no escape for you. Izuku holds Tsuyu tightly in his arms, hardly caring whether anyone else can see. It's a pleasure to meet you. We are the League of Villains. I know it's impolite, but we decided to invite ourselves into this haven of justice to say hello to the future of heroes. And besides, isn't this a fitting place for All Might, the symbol of peace, to take his last breath? When Midoriya heard those words, she silently gasped. What? He asked himself. As the villain goes on, he looks at Asui and trembles in his arms, asking, they want All Might? Kurogiri began to enlarge as 13 pointed a finger at him. He was supposed to be here, yet he's not from what I can see. There must have been some sort of change of plans that we're not able to predict. Oh well, I still have a role to play. Izuku let out a furious groan. He started to say, I can't think of that right now, I have to. But Bakugo and Kirishima interrupted him by leaping into the air at Kurogiri and attacking him with their quirks. Kirishima smirked and challenged, did you really expect us to stand around and let you destroy everything? They were surprised that it had no effect on the reformed mist villain. HMPH, I'm astounded you live up to your school's reputation. You really should be careful, somebody could get hurt. 13 yells at both of them. Kurogiri tells them, move out of the way. But it's too late, as he uses his quirk to suck them up. Insolent children. I'll scatter you across this facility to meet my comrades in your death. Izuku quickly gets on the floor with Tsuyu after realizing this, shielding her with his body as she closes her eyes and holds him close. Uraraka, Iida, and a few of their classmates were left in the Pro 13 when he, Tsuyu, and the majority of their class disappeared from the entrance. With a start, Iida said, they're gone. The One for All user, meanwhile, quickly realized that Tsuyu was absent from his arms. With a gasp, he opened his eyes to look for her, but all he saw was blackness. Midoriya exclaims, Asui, as she is flung from the darkness and descends to the Shipwreck Zone's ocean. When Izuku notices this, he yells briefly before crashing into the ocean. Now submerged, he glances around bewildered, thankfully taking a deep breath as he falls in. He thought to himself, water. He must have teleport quirk. Then he recalled what the adversary had told them. He searches for Asui. They came here to kill All Might, but he's not here. It's just us and... Wait, he says. No, 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 no. Where is she? He searched the water for her but was unable to spot her. Asui, he exclaimed, nearly forgetting that he was submerged. Exhausted from the shout, he began to drown. He squandered his energy trying to find his lover and swam upward in a frenzy. A shark villain swims straight toward him as he is losing unconscious. Ha ha ha. Looks like this little fishy can't swim, the villain said, poking the teen's flesh with his sharp fangs. First kill of the Da. Tsuyu, who had a purple lump on her arm, interrupted him abruptly, rushed in, and kicked him hard in the face. Leave him alone. She turns to face Izuku after the villain is momentarily rendered unconscious. Ribbit? She saw that he was drowning and quickly took action by slowly closing his eyes. She yelled, Midoriya, and spit out her tongue to seize him before swimming to the top and identifying the purple lump as Mineta. For a period, Sue was able to breathe underwater and swim quickly thanks to her quirk frog. Fortunately, she reached the top and came close to a boat that had space for their class. Without any delay, she carefully hoists her boyfriend to the boat's floor and places him on the ship's deck. Knowing that she had come to his rescue in time, Asui smiled as Izuku went to his knees and began coughing till he began to vomit up water. As she pushed her tongue back into her mouth, she saw Mineta awaken. Mineta smiled slightly when she realized she had saved him. She narrowed her brows at the praise regarding her chest. You know, for a frog you got some pretty big boobs, Sue. Perfect floaties. Tsuyu caught him with her tongue and threw him into the boat just as he was going to prod her chest with his head. Gah! To Asui's relief, Mineta sighed and grunted in agony after landing back first. Asui began to gently climb up the boat, thinking, he better not say anything like that to me again. When she reached the top and climbed aboard, she noticed that Deku was still coughing up water, which worried her. She approaches him and gives him a gentle back massage while she waits for him to finish, thinking that he could still have some water in his lungs. Deku stopped coughing and started gasping for breath. He sighed in relief as the water left his lungs, and then he opened his eyes and gasped, realizing he was on solid ground. What? He is perplexed when he realizes he is on the ship. He yelled, wait, how did I? Asui, until he sensed a gloved palm resting on his chin. He turned to face Asui, who was holding his chin, when the hand compelled him to so. Surprised, she croaks, I'm right here, Midoriya. And I told you to call me Tease Ribbit, as Izuku carries her in his arms. He looked at her tearfully and asked, are you hurt? It was difficult to discern if she was okay because of the tears in his eyes. Feeling too weak to defend her as the mist villain teleported them apart, he concluded, I should have protected you, but I couldn't. I'm so sorry. They're in the same location for his comfort, but what if Tsuyu was sent somewhere else? What if one of those bad guys killed her? She gives him a troubled look and puts her arms around him as he hugs her once again. It's okay, Deku, I'm here, she said softly at first. To get a better look at her, Izuku draws back and wipes the tear from his eye. Please calm down, I'm not hurt, I'm okay, he says. He smiled as he saw that she was completely unharmed. I landed in the water safely. See? He asked, his vision clear. He started to say, I'm sorry, I just thought I lost you for a, but was interrupted by a finger lightly touching his lips. He looks at Sue, who has her finger on his lips and is pointing behind herself, and is confused. As Suyu looks around before telling him, he gasps and pulls away from Mineta as soon as he sees her waking up. Izuku nodded and grinned at Sue, saying, "This is turning out to be a terrible day of class." Every time he saw her adorable face with her tongue protruding, he wanted to hug her close to him, kiss her, and even feel her again, but with Mineta present, it wasn't the proper moment. Izuku sighs and examines his hands, which are still in their gloves. He keeps repeating to himself what Kurogiri had told them. Yeah. I can't stop thinking of what that villain said to us. Looking directly into Asui's eyes, Midoriya continues, they knew our whole schedule and who would be here. Asui interrupts, they must have gotten into school files when we were in the clo. She blushed as she croaked, ribbit. Deku was perplexed and realized what he was going to say in front of Mineta, who was observing them. He giggles, I mean. When we were in the cafeteria, Asui touches her cheek and says, he. And when the teachers were busy trying to get the media off school grounds too. She concluded for him, receiving a nod from Deku, who sighed and was considering how he would get his girlfriend and Mineta to safety. So that means they've been waiting for the perfect time to attack. Just like Todoroki said they were earlier. When he remembered something, he snapped out of his reverie. Asui tilts her head and says, Hey Sue. Thanks, Ribbit. He smiles at Izuku, who blushes, and says, thank you for saving me from that villain. Sue smiles back, blushing as well. You're welcome, Midori. Hey. Wait a minute. It's not like these guys can really kill All Might, Mineta added, glancing toward the USJ's entrance as the two lovers looked at him. Once he shows up, he'll pound these villains until there's nothing left. Think about it though, she said, first with Izuku looking at her and then Mineta. If the villains spent so much time planning this attack, then they probably figured out a way to kill him. Deku gasped in shock when he heard this. Izuku looked at Suyu, surprised. He didn't expect her to say that. There's no way they can kill All Might, right? Right? It wasn't long before Asui continued. And didn't you hear what that villain said? Given that villains are present, Midoriya became little enraged when that last point was brought up. Perhaps we should be more concerned with leaving her alive and avoiding being tortured to death. He really doesn't care if he gets harmed right now, all he wants is to keep Asui safe, and he will stop at nothing to keep these bad guys from hurting her. I'll defend you, he thought, glancing at his fists. I suggest we leave this area. If we do not, we may not live long enough to see All Might or even our loved ones. Additionally, it's uncertain whether All Might will survive even if he does appear. When she was done, she and her partner saw Mineta trembling in terror, his hands up to his lips as though he was about to bite his nails even though he was wearing gloves, and he was staring at Izuku while frantically waving his arms up and down. The pros are going to help us, right? Before continuing, he said, tell Frog Boobs to stop talking. The taller youngster gave him a frown for that and the yelling. Was he saying Frog Boobs? Izuku thought, almost striking more fear into Minoru, telling him seriously. Hey don't. He couldn't finish when he heard a shocked croak from Suyu. Ribbit. When villains noticed her staring off to the side of the boat, they began swimming in its direction, including the shark villain who nearly murdered Deku. You're a jerk. I'll enjoy eating you. He yelled at them, primarily Asui, who kicked him. This infuriated Izuku hearing that all the while Mineta screamed with tears pouring from his eyes. Oh. The bad dudes. He yelled in terror. As the three turned to face the baddies, Sue croaked in astonishment and felt arms encircling her, revealing herself to be Izuku. She flushed as she looked at him, even noticing that he was staring at the villains with anger, as he held her in his arms with concern. Deku. Holding his cheek with her palm, Asui whispered, without worrying if Mineta was watching it, which he isn't because he was too preoccupied with sobbing and staring at the criminals in terror. She was perplexed until he went on, if they're here for All Might, they may have a way to defeat him. They wouldn't have planned this attack if they didn't. Deku was looking at her with a worried expression on his face. Asui, you might be right, he said. But it doesn't matter right now because he's not here. I'm going to get you out of here to safety. I promise. Why? Suyu interrupts him with a startling kiss on the lips. When the two pull away, staring into each other's eyes, Asui tells him, I know, but you have to remember, I want to be a hero too. She reminds him, that means we have to protect and save others like him. Fortunately, Mineta was too preoccupied to notice the villain's fear, and the villains themselves couldn't see her because they were at the bottom of the boat. She is correct. He recalled watching All Might on television, particularly when the symbol of peace yells his catchphrase, "Fear not, citizens, hope has arrived." He thought to himself, just like All Might. Why? Since I am present. He grinned and turned to face Sue. You're right, he said, keeping her by his side. I'll confront this evil and defend you and others. I'll even F.A. No, Deku, Asui interrupts. We'll confront them as a couple. Ribbit. She whispered with a cute blush and her tongue sticking out. Izuku smiled as they kissed again before pulling away. I love you, Asui. He whispered, kissing her nose, making her croak with a reddened face. She whispers back to him smiling. I love you too, my cute Deku. Ribbit. If they can beat All Might. Izuku says, glancing down at the villains below, then we have to stop whatever it is these bad guys are planning. We have to work together. He turns to Asui and Minoru and says, we have to keep our classmates, teachers, even All Might safe and alive. No one at UA knows what's happening right now. Mineta is still trembling in terror and is obviously not paying attention to them. Then, grabbing Mineta's whole focus, Midoriya looks up and says, it's up to us. The crimson on Tsuyu's cheeks turned to a cherry as he concluded in a serious tone. She had never seen Deku speak in such a way before, and she thought, wow. He's so hot. Before croaking in astonishment, Ribbit. What? Stop it, please, pay attention. She shakes the emotion from her mind, but she still glances at him since, despite being her boyfriend, he looks incredibly good. What? In a fit of fury, Mineta yelled, what do you mean fight? Then he began to cry, which caused Asui to stop thinking. Are you crazy? Do you really think we can merely take on these individuals when they have the potential to slay All Might? When we got twisted here, did you strike your head? The best course of action, he then informs them, is to just wait for a true pro from UA to come and rescue us. Tsuyu put his palm on Izuku's chin and thought while he yelled, looking at him. A ribbit? What are you thinking about, Midoriya? She croaked, raising her head to get Izuku's attention. Izuku glances at the villains and says to her and Mineta, think about it, those villains down there, clearly they have an advantage in the water and assume that's where we'll be fighting them, she said, tapping her chin with a finger. Are you even paying attention? If that's the case, they must have known what was inside the USJ before they warped in. Mineta yelled at him, but he ignored her as Asui looked at the floor in contemplation before telling Izuku. Yeah, but for a group with such careful planning, there's one thing that really sticks out to me, something that just doesn't add up. Deku nodded. Then he turns to face his lover and says, they sent you here, Asui. But stops as he realizes what he accidentally called her. Ribbit. She croaked, looking with her finger on her chin, making him blush nervously. She's so cute. He thought before shaking it off. Oops. I was referring to Sue. Yes. When she saw him in this state, she burst out laughing. That kind of fell apart on you, didn't it? She said, smiling as he sighed in relief and smiled at her. A tiny bit. Why is her presence important? Izuku gasped when Mineta yelled a question. Yeah, all right. He turned to face Tsuyu and said, it means the enemies probably don't know what our quirks are. His girlfriend croaked in surprise as he said, Ribbit. You've got a point. They would have sent me into that fire zone instead of somewhere full of water if they knew my quirk was frog, she says, glancing at the fire zone. Asui couldn't help but stare at the floor in terror, knowing that she would have become dehydrated if she had been there. As he looked back at the villains, Mineta smiled as her boyfriend noticed this and put his hand on her shoulder to get her attention. They probably separated us because they didn't know what we could do and planned to overpower us once we were separated and in smaller groups, make it easier to pick us off one by one. Mineta shook in his boots until Izuku told them, we can use that to our advantage. He looks down at the water villains and says, the three of us might be extremely powerful because they have no idea what our quirks are. Upon concluding his explanation, Midoriya sighed and knelt down to examine his hand intently. Look, none of them are trying to climb into the boat, the two say, realizing that Izuku, who had walked away from the edge, was correct. This proves they're a little unsure, but that means they're not going to underestimate us either. They're being smart and playing it safe, for now. Asui gives him a troubled glance before turning to face Mineta, who is muttering something about waiting on the pros while keeping his focus on the villains. Ignoring his muttering, she approaches Izuku and crouches on her hands and feet to face him while keeping the villains out of sight. Deku? She whispered, causing him to gasp. Gah. Fortunately, neither Minoru nor the villains downstairs heard him since he covered his lips. He turned to face Sue, who smiled reassuringly and said, everything will be okay. I'll be okay. I know. He smiled slowly. It's just those villains in the water. I can't let them hurt you. Asui interrupted him, holding his hand and confusing him until she carefully took off his right gloved hand, making sure he wasn't looking before turning back to Izuku. Asui, he whispered. What are you? He froze, blushing a very beet red. Suyu had placed his hand on her chest, and he nearly yelled until Su put a finger to his lips. Shush. Deku, he might hear us, she said, turning back to Izuku after looking at Mineta, who was not paying attention. Just relax and enjoy it, she told him, her face flushed slightly. Go on. She insisted, tilting her head with a smile, reviving Midoriya's smile as he feels the warmth and softness of her chest. He whispered back joyfully, why yeah, together. My froppy. Su croaked with a red glow, and Izuku looked at Mineta to make sure he wasn't watching, then put his hand on Asui's cheek and let her cuddle into it slowly with her eyes closed. Ribbit ribbit. Midoriya grinned, enjoying her croaks, and when they were finished, he put his gloves back on and they walked over to Mineta, getting on their knees only Deku, as Mineta was still standing and Su was crouching on her hands and feet. Taking a deep breath, she said, I'll go first, if you want. She looked at Izuku, who nodded, reassuring her that she could jump high and cling to almost any wall. So let's talk quirks. She didn't really need to explain her quirk because Midoriya already knew, but she needed to tell Mineta because he doesn't know. Naturally, I can protrude my tongue for up to 20 meters. Oh, and I can clean my stomach by spitting it out, but that's not really helpful. I can finally release a hazardous mucus, however it only slightly stings. Izuku smiled at her, saying, I know you're powerful but that's amazing Su. She blushed with a croak and Deku, who had been a little red after hearing her say that about her mucus, shook the feeling off as she finished. We can probably only use my jumping and my tongue here. Forget about the last two. Midoriya looks at his arm gravely and says, I have my super strength, a stockpile. But it comes at a price. Asui does her best to contain her tears as she hears this, remembering how he broke his bones the last 2 times. If I use it, I'm pretty much out of commission. It's a double-edged sword until I can control it. When he's done, he notices Suyu staring at him with sadness, but he consoles her a little by saying, I'll control in no time, I promise. Mineta started by saying, I've got these sticky balls that come out of my head. He removed a ball of hair from his head and replaced it with another, which he then affixed to a boat wall. Their strength varies, depending on how I'm feeling. They might stick for hours, maybe a whole day. They might stick for hours, maybe a whole day. They grow back as fast as I pull them off, but I'll bleed if I use too many, he said, tapping the ball he had adhered to the wall. Oh, and they don't stick to me. I just bounce right off them. After he had finished explaining, the two were just staring at him, unable to comment on his quirk. Mineta soon broke down in tears, saying, Hey, stop staring at me like that. I said we should wait for the true heroes for this reason. We will perish because my quirk is completely unsuitable for combat. Izuku gasped and tried to calm him down as he said, No, you have amazing ability. Something wasn't quite right, so he halted in the middle of his sentence. Really huh? He notices a huge water-made hand approaching the middle of the boat as he looks over his shoulder. Be careful. The one for all user thought, oh no. As he looked down at his girlfriend, who was staring at him with red in her face. Oh no. Midoriya grabs Mineta and jumps, getting Suyu and pulling her out of the way in time, earning a shocked croak as they landed out of the way of the attack. Deku covered Su with his body to protect her, looking up with anger as the water hand goes back into the water. The three even noticed the ship was cut in half. Are you okay? Why yeah. Ribbit, thank you for saving me. Deku, she replied after he checked her surroundings to make sure she was unharmed. Ribbit. She whispered, beginning to snuggle her head into his chest, making him flush. Thankfully Mineta was too busy looking at the center of the boat, the villains sliced in half, leaving him both shocked and in panic. Izuku realized what they can do to escape and tells Su. I think I have an idea. I'm getting bored now. Let's get the show on the road. They glance to the side to see the villain, whose quirk is to create a massive arm out of water. That power was strong. Now the ship's sinking, the sea villain yelled, holding Suyu close to him while squatting on his knees and holding her in his arms. Her face could not grow any redder than this. She remained in his arms and talked anxiously. In a pathetic attempt to beat the baddies, Mineta cries and rushes to the boat's edge, taking out the balls from his head and tossing them into the ocean after pointing out the obvious. Mineta, don't freak out. Midoriya shouted only for Minoru to look at him, pointing at the water, constantly crying. You need calm down. They make a guess about your quirk. After letting Tsuyu go for a while, Izuku turns to face the baddies, but he notices something. What are these things, for crying out loud? As he splattered the floating balls away from him, a villain in the water questioned incredulously and worriedly, wait. They're frightened to touch them? Midoriya thought before letting out a gasp. While thinking, Asui looks at him and thought to herself. He might be thinking of a strategy. She was brought out of her thoughts on her boyfriend and noticed Minoru back away crying. We're fish food, he yelled in terror. Are you sure the hero thing is right for you? Sue asks him. Mineta glared at her with teary eyes. Shut up. It is more strange to witness your current lack of fear. Tsuyu is terrified, but she doesn't show it. We just got out of junior high a while ago, Mineta adds, crying and frightened, not realizing he's completely wrong. I never imagined that just a few days after I started at UA, I would be facing death. It's unbelievable that I won't get to touch Yaoyorozu's boobs before I die. Asui sighed, feeling uneasy about what he had said. Sue, she said, turning to face Izuku, who went on as she looked up at him and he looked at her. I have a plan. He said, his voice tinged with grief, which perplexed her until he whispered the idea to her. The plan, which included one for all, left Tsuyu stunned after a few seconds. But Deku no. You can't? Izuku interrupts. I won't. Asui. I swear, he said, smiling and pointing to the 2 fingers on his left arm. It won't be my arm, just 2 of my fingers. Sue started to cry when he uttered the final line, you have to trust me. Froppy. She doesn't want to watch him suffer, but she will always be there for him. After wiping away her tears, she smiled and whispered, oh okay Deku. Ribbit. I trust you. He smiled and kissed her on the lips, causing her to blush as he looked down at the villains. He took a deep breath before continuing, saying, an enemy that is certain of their victory is bound to make a mistake. In a previous TV interview, All Might made a statement similar to that. What? What does that signify? Now's our chance. We can beat them, Mineta exclaimed, gasping as he saw Izuku trembling. Asui gasped as she turned to face them and saw how serious he was. Deku. She murmured, observing him place his foot on the edge and turn to face the criminals. Come on. Be like Kachan. Now die. Izuku thought, leaping to his feet. Stupid move, kid. He said, causing several of the criminals to snicker. One shouted, even if I use a smash, I can't get them all at once when they're in a circle like that, as Midoriya extended his left arm in a threatening gesture. In addition to getting my girl out of here, I still have to get her to safety. So I can't give up my arm yet. Clutching his teeth, he thought, pay attention. Remember the picture of the egg not blowing up. Sue grabs Minoru as he prepares his strength, puts her arm around him, picks him up, and positions herself, thinking, Deku. Be careful. She looks at him and prepares, waiting for his signal. Ready Mineta? Instead of responding, he trembled in terror, just as she did, even spotting Izuku above the water. Grab this. Delaware smash. With that shout, Midoriya flicks his 2 fingers, sending a powerful blow into the water making a whirlpool shocking the villains who were sucked into the whirlpool. With that, Deku felt pain in his 2 fingers having damaged them from one for all, holding his hand, but he stays strong and looks at Tsuyu and their classmate. Sue, Mineta now. Ribbit. When Asui heard the signal, she croaked and threw her tongue out to grab Izuku, wrapping it around him before jumping and running as far away from the villains and sinking ship as she could. She quickly realized he was in pain and wanted to land as quickly as possible to help him, but to her surprise, Mineta was using his quirk Wella. He was removing the hairballs from his head and tossing them into the water. Take it, you bad guys, you can eat my sticky balls. He yelled. If a strong force is applied to the water's surface, the water will be pushed away, and then come rushing right back to the middle. The green-haired lovers saw that the purple balls were drawn into the whirlpool and stuck to the villains, who were now sticking to each other as a result. Holding his left hand and trembling in agony, Deku yelled. The villains screamed, trying to escape Mineta's quirk but failing, now clumped together into a giant ball. When she saw this, Sue said, we rounded them all up. She smiled at Deku and said, my hero. She looked forward, thinking, not too shabby. As she led them to safety, she remarked, I guess we passed the shipwreck zone. You guys are amazing. Both of you. Asui kindly places her boyfriend down next to her as they land in the water away from the deep end and the villains, still bound together by Mineta's quirk. He smiles and says, thank you, Sue. He watches her as she croaks, her face glowing red, and as she walks back to shore, wanting to get out of the water, Mineta, who is being dragged by Asui, laughs. My balls are more sticky now that I had a nice poop this morning. Izuku groans in agony as he holds the 2 injured fingers on his left hand, saying, "It took everything I had to keep my composure. It's such a gamble. What if they had reverse underwater that we didn't know about?" The 2 he was with decided they didn't want to hear that much detail about his quirk. "They could have ya," he muttered amid the hubbub. After a small giggle, his girlfriend told him, "Please quit creeping me out." Sorry," Deku said, then hissed in pain, causing Suyu to gasp as he looked at his broken fingers. She croaked almost in tears and looked at the short boy. To be fair, she wasn't frightened by that. She had to say it because Mineta was present and would be suspicious if she didn't speak. He glances at her and says, "Mineta." "Huh?" She then informs him that there might still be bad guys in the water who managed to evade the assault. "So, as I assist Midoriya with her hand, why don't you wait for us over there?" While pointing away from her and Izuku, Minoru screamed in fear, realizing there could be more villains and run off. "Okay, bye." As he yelled, he climbed out of the water, leaving Midoriya speechless. He turned to face Asui and said, Why did you?" But she interrupted him by taking his hand in her gloved palms and staring up at him. "Are you okay?" "Yeah, I'm fine," Izuku tells her, "but don't worry about me. We should make getting help our top priority." Sue interrupts, "Deku, you're my boyfriend?" She inquired, worriedly glancing down at his shattered fingers. She pointed out, "Of course, I'll be worried about you no matter what. Remember what I said about my mucus?" She questioned him. "My mucus can also help ease the pain a little, so I'll put some on your hand to ease the pain," she says, and he nods. When she looked at him, she saw that his face was flushed. He recalled that she had told him about her mucus, and the very thought of it excites him. He quickly shook it off and turned to face her. Are you sure, Asui?" he asked her. He doesn't want her to feel uncomfortable or anything, but she insists. "Ribbit." Midoriya smiled as she said, "I'm sure it'll help you, but it will sting a little. My hero." "Okay. I'm ready." She glances back to see if Mineta is looking back, but fortunately he's too busy watching the fight between Aizawa and the villains present. Sue took Izuku's left hand and put it on her cheek with ease, surprising Izuku. Shortly after, he felt a clear, slimy fluid come out of her skin and spread all over his hand. As it ran down his skin and damaged fingers, he felt a slight stinging from her mucus, but it wasn't burning. A broad smile appeared on his face, and he shook a little. What am I doing wrong? Is it her mucus?" he asked himself thoughtfully. "Am I becoming thrilled about it?" Soon he lets out a sigh in relief, feeling less pain from his broken fingers. Noticing he was enjoying it, Suyu giggled with a croak. "Ribbit." Unaware that he was looking around to make sure no one was watching, she took a piece of cloth from Midoriya's PE pants and carefully wrapped it around his palm, thinking, he really likes it. "There, that should help you ease the—" Deku's kiss interrupted Asui, causing her to croak in shock. She jumped on him, wrapping her legs around his body, and kissed him back because it was so passionate. Midoriya lost her balance and fell back into the water, but the kiss continued beneath the water, Sue still on top of Izuku, and he started holding her with his hand on her legs while her tongue wrapped around his like before. Suyu realized they had sunk a little too deep, so she quickly got off Izuku and helped him out of the water as quickly as she could. Once they were up at the surface, he gasped for air and panted. Asui had stored air in her mouth, so she passed it to Deku, giving him air through their kiss. After a minute, they pulled away, looking into each other's eyes with a flush. "Are you okay?" He laughed when she asked him concernedly. "Why yeah, sorry about that." He apologized profusely and got to his feet, saying, "No, it's okay," as she also told him. "I really needed that. I love you." He tells her, "I love you too." He then turns to face her and notices the exit, thinking, "I have to get her out of here. If we follow the shore to the exit, then we can avoid the central plaza entirely." Asui concurred, saying, "That way we don't run into the villains." Midoriya gasped when he heard her say, "Mr. Aizawa is facing off with them." He had totally forgotten that Eraserhead was engaged in combat with the criminals in the central plaza. Can he face them on his own? How long can he withstand such a large group? "Asui, take Mineta and go with the others," he said to himself before turning to face Sue. "I'll go assist Aizawa." Suyu let out a startled cough. What? What are you saying, Deku?" Asui gasped as Izuku looked at her and explained, "If he doesn't get some backup soon, then he's just going to overexert himself." He looked at the battle between Eraser and the villains and said, "He'll end up being defeated by the villains because he was trying to keep us safe." Deku, and no, I'm not letting you go alone. She grips his arm firmly and says, "I'm going with you." Izuku lets out a startled cry and breaks free of her hold. What, Asui? I need you to go to Thea, she interrupts. No, I won't abandon you. I promised to always be there for you, even if we defeat the bad guys. Deku, please. With tears streaming down her face, she begged. She was willing to accompany him and fight the villains to save their instructor, and he couldn't stop her, and no matter how hard he tries, she will always be with him, always. Izuku was astonished by what she said and smiled briefly. Okay, Asui. This made Suyu smile. Ribbit ribbit. We'll go together. Midoriya laughed when she croaked in a cutesy manner. Mineta was clearly in a state of dread again when they saw her approaching them and instantly withdrew, blushing. Wait. Don't tell me you're suggesting we help Mr. Aizawa. Minoru started. I heard what you said. Are you two trying to get us killed or something? Izuku looked at him and clarified. I'm not saying that we should jump into the middle of a battle, he replied, startled. Fortunately, he didn't listen to their private talk, but he did hear what they said about going to help me, Eraserhead. Izuku looked at his hand with the cloth covering it and his injured fingers and said, but maybe we can find a way to take a few of those villains out and lighten his load. We just had our first real fight and won, but that only gave us false hope, he thought before turning to face the fight, because it made us think our quirks could actually work against the enemies. We will soon discover our mistakes. When a hand touched his hand, he snapped out of his reverie and turned to discover it was Suyu, who grinned and said, we're in on this together, Midoriya. Ribbit. She croaked, which made him smile. Right. Izuku nodded, then took her hand in his. Let's go. Mineta nodded shakily and muttered, let's just get this over with. They crept closer to the shipwreck zone's edge, arriving at the line separating it from the central plaza to assist their teacher. Remember, Midoriya, we're just here to see how things are going, right? The three said, ducking into the water at the edge to hide in case villains were close. Izuku nods to the shorter teen as Asui croaks, yeah, I know, we'll get out of here the second it seems dangerous. Minoru was watching the battle between Eraser and the villains when Izuku held Suyu close to him, keeping her safe by holding her by the hips. Ribbit? She blushed slightly and gave a faint, startled croak. The three were taken aback by Eraserhead's effortless and amazing combat abilities as they watched the battle. With a nod of agreement from Suyu, Deku exclaimed, wow. They saw their homeroom instructor leap high, grab two villains with his scarf, and then crash on them, knocking them out cold. He paused for a second and started breathing heavily. Ribbit. He's amazing. His quirk was giving him severe dry eye, and he was very weary. He turned as he heard footsteps and saw Tamura sulking as he charged at him. First it was 23 seconds. The final boss. Shota positioned himself in a battle stance and threw his scarf in an attempt to grab Shigaraki, but he managed to avoid it. He grabs Aizawa and says, then it was 24 seconds. And then 20. Then 17. Aizawa interrupted him, avoiding contact and striking Aizawa in the belly with his elbow. The three onlookers gasped and grinned, but Asui's smile dimmed as she realized something was amiss, and something wasn't right. Shigaraki's hand had deflected Aizawa's blow, and he now held his elbow. Tamura grinned beneath the severed hand on his face as Eraserhead's hair fell down. He looks directly at Eraser and says, I found your tail, but it was difficult to see when you were jumping around. It's your hair. Shota exclaimed as he saw Shigaraki's quirk cause his sleeve's elbow to grow gray and split. When it drops, it means you've stopped using your quirk. You're having to blink more often. As Aizawa's elbow was destroyed by his quirk, the villain maintained his sneer. His muscle fibers were visible as the skin started to peel off, warning him, don't push yourself too far. You might just fall apart. Aizawa moves quickly and holds Tamura's damaged arm while kicking him away. Eraserhead, who was now growing tired, said, he destroyed my elbow. The villain saw this. Huh, that annoying power of yours isn't meant to fight big groups now, is it? Don't you think you're a little out of your element here, Eraser? Izuku shook and gasped as he spoke to Eraser, who was defending himself against two more enemies. Because of the villain's quirk, its application, and his obvious insane smile, he was terrified because he had witnessed this before. He's. Suyu croaked in surprise while Izuku was saying this. Deku, what's wrong? He asks without answering. Deku? She asks, holding him and trying to get him to talk. It's him. Asui pauses and gives him a glance. Huh? When he places her behind him, Asui asks, what do you mean? He informs her, startlingly, with an angry look on his face. Shigaraki started laughing before he could finish, saying, Asui. It's him. The figure from my nightmares. He's. He's the one. He says, Shota, look at you, still standing. You really are cool. Oh. By the way, I'm not the final boss. The three gasped as they turned to face their teacher. Behind Aizawa, an enormous bird villain materialized. Eraser repeatedly slammed his head into the floor as he twisted. Izuku said, no. Mr. Aizawa. He got down and hid, taking Sue with him. He says, Asui, to her. He said gravely, listen to me. You have to get out of here and get somewhere safe. She stares at him in disbelief, able to see and sense his rage and terror. She sobbed as she exclaimed, Deku, no, I can't. I can't leave you. Ribbit. Mineta was left perplexed and unaware of what was going on. Suyu, who was about to cry, shook her head at Izuku and said, Asui, please, you need to go get to safety, it's too dangerous. No, Deku, I'm not. Her partner interrupts her with a roar that sounds like a whisper. He grabs his girlfriend by the shoulders and says, I can't lose you, Asui. I can't. She looks at him in disbelief and sees him crying as he goes on, more composed this time. Sue interrupted him with a kiss, saying, I can't lose you. You're the only friend I ever had in years. If I lose you. Despite his amazement, he holds her and gives her a kiss in return, both of them unaware that Mineta is staring at them in complete disbelief. As he watched the bird villain hurt their teacher, he would have demanded answers, but he was too terrified. The two lovers gazed into each other's eyes as they withdrew. Asui begs, Deku, please. She started crying, startling Midoriya, saying, You're my best friend, I don't want to lose you too. I'm not leaving you. You can't stop me from being here for you. He recalls her assuring him that she would always be by his side. He groaned and shook slightly after that, gazing at her with tears in his eyes. As she snuggled into his right palm, he put it on her cheek and said, Okay, Asui. We'll do it together. But, please, don't get hurt. As they heard Tamura tell Aizawa about the bird villain, she smiled at him and wiped away some of her tears. I won't, Deku. Ribbit. I promise. After saying, meet the bioengineered anti-symbol of peace. But you can call him, Nomu. The Nomu then restrains Shota and lets forth a cruel scream. Soon after, Aizawa's arm was wrenched by the Nomu, shattering his bones. Eraser shouted in agony, ah! While Shigaraki grinned. After he's done, Aizawa looks at the Nomu and uses his quirk against him, but the Nomu crushes his arm, causing him to scream in agony as the villain grabs his head and smashes his face onto the ground. You can erase people's powers. That's irritating, but it's nothing impressive. When faced with true devastating powers, you might as well be a quirkless. As Mineta covers his lips and Suyu trembles in terror, Izuku grasps her in his arms in disbelief. He looks at the two and sobs, saying, No, I can't watch this anymore, we should be getting out of here super fast, shouldn't we? Sue glances at Deku, who is still holding him. She croaks, Ribbit. And he turns to face her. As he was ready to go with her and Minoru, he notices that she is terrified and embraces her close. However, Kurogiri, the warp villain, appears next to Shigaraki, Tamura Shigaraki. Kurogiri starts to attract Tamura's attention. Kurogiri, he said, glancing at him. Kurogiri tells him what happened at the top of the stairs. Did you manage to kill 13? The space hero is out of commission, but there were students I was unable to disperse across the USJ, and one of them got outside of the facility. It won't be long until more pros arrive. The leader of the antagonists was taken aback. Huh. Shigaraki became enraged and began to scrape his neck while breathing slowly. He abruptly halted what he was doing, keeping his fingers on the sides of his neck. Kurogiri. You fool. If you weren't our only warp gate, I'd tear apart every last atom in your body, until there's nothing left. He pulls his hands away to show bloody scratches on his neck, saying, There's no way we can win if dozens of pros show up to stop us. It's game over, back to the title screen. And I was looking forward to finishing this today. Damn it. He turns to confront Kurogiri. Let's go home. The trio of UA students let out a gasp. What they were hearing was unbelievable. Mineta questioned, did I hear that right? Did he say they're gonna just leave? Asui, who was still in Midoriya's arms, nodded. Mineta murmured to him, that's what it sounded like it to me. She glanced at the villains in the center plaza and gave a silent cheer and a tearful smile. Yes, that means we're gonna okay. Sue was pleased. Yet he still had a strange feeling. Yes, but, she said, noticing that Minoru had swum toward her and reached out for her breast. He chuckled nervously as she scowled at him, but before he could even touch her, Suyu grabbed him and slammed his head underneath. Sue said to her partner, who was staring at her, "I have a real bad feeling about this Deku." When he was done, his girlfriend released Mineta, giving him a warning frown and allowing him to collect his breath. It seems weird that they'd retreat at this point, even if help is on the way. Then, as Izuku pondered, she tucks herself into his arms. He didn't understand why they were leaving after coming up with this plot to kill All Might until he heard Tamura say, "I hope they really leave. That way, Asui's safe. I really want this to be over, but what's going on? Why is this game over?" Shigaraki then turns to face the three, causing them to gasp as he rushes toward them. "Oh, before we leave, let's make sure the symbol of peace is broken." He knelt down in front of them and opened the palms of his hands, saying, "Let's wreck his pride." He smirked beneath the severed hand and reached for Asui and Deku, who gasped as everything began to slow down. "Let's make this hurt," he said. In this slow motion, he started seeing visions of Tsuyu being converted into dust, with him close behind him, because he didn't have enough time to react and move both of them out of the way. He stepped in front of Asui, avoiding Tamura's left hand and thinking, "No. No." He quickly covered her with his body and held her firmly. When the villain's right palm touched the side of Izuku's face, the one for all users' pupils contracted in terror at the actual grasp of death. To their astonishment, nothing occurred while they waited for anything to happen, notably Izuku turning into dust. But even in his arms, Tsuyu was crying out of terror. To her relief, Deku is still here, his powerful arms still encircling her, even though she had assumed that this would be the last time she would see him. Being aware that he wasn't turning the UA Shigaraki's side and turned back to face the Nomu as he threw the pupil into the dust. The three also look at the Nomu and find that Aizawa saved them in time by using the remainder of his quirk for today. His eyes are red from dry eye, and it wasn't long before Nomu smashed his head onto the floor once more, knocking him out. "You really are so cool. Eraserhead." When Izuku notices this gap, he becomes enraged and leaps out of the water to shout at Shigaraki. Izuku clenched his right hand into a glowing fist and yelled, "Get away from her. I gotta get Asui out of here. I need to save her. I can't lose her. I won't." Smash. Then, when Sue looks shocked, he punches Tamura. She yelled, "Deku." As he punched Tamura, generating a strong wind gust that caused her to shield Mineta's eyes from being blown away, as had occurred to others of the villains, unconscious or not, shattering all the lights in the vicinity. Asui opened her eyes as the wind stopped and saw Deku covered in a large cloud of smoke. She yelled anxiously, "Ribbit, Deku," until she noticed that he was standing there, uninjured and living. She was startled to see that even after using one for all, his arm was undamaged and no shattered bones, no ripped or bruised flesh, and it wasn't even hanging from the elbow joint. Izuku was taken aback as well. "What?" He looks at his limb and is shocked to find it undamaged. He looked up and asked himself, "My arm's not broken. I can't believe it. How? After all that training?" He breathed in astonishment as he saw the Nomu standing in front of him, shielding Shigaraki from the blow. Izuku wondered, where did he come from? And even noticed another item. Considering what Tsuyu had said earlier, he retracted his good arm and wondered, "Wait, hold on, it didn't hurt him?" Deku recalled that and concluded, if the villains spent so much time planning this attack, then they probably figured out a way to kill him. No way. He was reminded of his nightmare, including how the school had been demolished, all of the students who had died, and Asui. He needed to get her out of here. You're pretty powerful." Izuku is startled out of his reverie and turns to face Shigaraki, who goes on. Midoriya gasps as Nomu takes his arm shortly after he says, "That smash of yours. Are you one of All Might's disciples? Doesn't matter, I'm done with you now." He yelled, "Asui, run!" in an attempt to escape the grasp that was too big for him, but Sue ignored him and, using rapid reflex, punched Shigaraki's arm away, almost throwing him off balance. She yelled, "Let him go," and tried to move Izuku away from the Nomu with her tongue. When Midoriya heard wild laughter, she turned to see Tamura reach out for Asui and Mineta with both hands and regain his footing as if nothing had happened. Deku sobbed as he realized he couldn't save her. No. Asui, he thought, but he couldn't accept failure. His body began to glow once more in a matter of seconds. He murmured, "No," and then yelled. Izuku was going to use his other hand to deliver a one-for-all punch to the Nomu when they were all stopped by a huge explosion coming from the USJ entrance. "I'm not letting anyone take her away from me," he said. Everyone stops to look at what it was. When Midoriya opened the doors and saw All Might entering, he gasped in surprise. "Students, don't be afraid," All Might said. With his tie torn off, he said, "Why?" "Because I am here." Mineta started crying as she saw the symbol of peace himself. He exclaimed, "Look, we're saved," as Asui managed to free Deku from Nomu's grasp. She croaked, looking at All Might, and Izuku said, "Ribbit. He's here." "All Might," he said, noticing that All Might was furious and not smiling at all. With the exception of Tamura, who spoke with a scowl at All Might, the criminals were stunned to find the #1 hero here at the USJ while he, Asui, and Mineta observed. And he's not smiling. "Well, it looks like this game is getting a continue." A villain said, "Holy crap. It's All Might." Before long, another villain said, "I've never seen the guy in person before." A third villain observes the two and remarks, "I didn't expect him to be so huge." All Might interrupted him, saying, "Hey. This is no time to talk, you idiots. If we strike now, we can kill him." While carefully picking up the unconscious Mr. Aizawa, All Might used his speed to quickly take out all of the standing villains. The symbol of peace feels horrible about not being there to defend them because he can see how bad his current condition is. He said sadly, "I'm sorry, Aizawa. I should have been here sooner." Then he turned to face his 3 students who were near the criminals. He ran quickly and seized the 3, even punching Tamura to knock the severed hand out of his face. This helped to get Izuku, Tsuyu, and Mineta away from the criminals who were conscious. Izuku gasped when he realized he was standing directly beside Tsuyu and Mineta, with Aizawa motionless in front of them. Midoriya thought, "Whoa," as his lover pulled him into a close embrace. "Ribbit ribbit," she said joyfully, relieved that her sweetheart was all right. Izuku returned her hug with a smile and a kiss on the head. When Mineta realized they were no longer in the water, she looked about and said, what the heck?" All Might called out to them, everyone back to the entrance, to catch their attention. The 2 lovers nodded and moved apart, saying, "And take Aizawa with you. He doesn't have much time if he stays here." Mineta yells, "Yes, sir." While Sue croaks, "Ribbit." Izuku says, grinning as he turns to face All Might. "You saved us, All Might. Thank you." Shigaraki started to pant with a tinge of frustration as All Might nodded. He explained, "No, no, no. It wasn't supposed to go this way," as he picked up the severed hand he wears as a mask. He put the hand back to his face and sighed, saying, "He's still fast, father. Somehow he managed to land a hit on me. Of course a government hero relies on violence. I wasn't prepared, I couldn't even see him when he moved. But he's not as fast as I thought he would be, not as fast as he used to be. I guess it's true after all." He looks at the hero of the year with a grin. All Might really is getting weaker. Returning to the 3, Izuku, with Mineta's assistance, throws Mr. Aizawa on his back and keeps him there. Tsuyu volunteered to assist, but Izuku insisted on carrying their teacher. He's only being kind to her until he glances at the symbol of peace and recalls something about that big bad guy. "All Might, you can't," the aforementioned hero says, turning to face him. "That brain villain took one." Asui's croak interrupts him, revealing that he nearly made a one-for-all statement in front of Mineta. All Might extended a hand back at Izuku and said, "Oh, one punch of my quirk and I didn't break my arm this time," but he wasn't fazed at all. He's too strong. Young Midoriya. Everyone might turn to grin and give him a thumbs up. Deku and Sue became red at the sound of the words, "I got this. Go protect your loved one." Izuku nodded and grinned, understanding what he meant, and they began to go. Tsuyu accompanying him and assisting with Aizawa. All Might glances at Tamura and rushes directly at him as they ascend the stairs. After that, Tamura said, "Carolina." Nomu. The aforementioned villain blocks All Might's path as he uses his hands to strike an X/. "Smash," he said, striking the Nomu without harming it. In the meantime, as All Might battles the enemies, Izuku, Tsuyu, and Mineta are assisting Eraserhead in getting to safety. Mineta said, one question, first." Izuku gasped, trying to make up an excuse as his flush returned. "Are you two dating?" What, of course not. We're just," when he continues, Asui interrupts, her blush returning. She glances to Izuku, who was taken aback by her statement to Mineta, and says, "Yes, he's my boyfriend." "Asui?" she asks, grinning as she taps her cheek with her finger. He gently returned her smile after realizing she was correct. "It's okay, Deku. We weren't going to be able to hide it any longer." Mineta said, "That's cool." First, she interrupts, saying, "Izuku, you're one lucky guy to get as. Call me Sue, Mineta." She admonished, frightening him with a menacing gaze. Only Deku can call me Asui, she said, and Minoru quickly nodded in alarm. Izuku laughed, nevertheless, at how adorable Su is holding his right hand while being cautious not to move him too much because he is carrying their homeroom instructor on his back. Soon after, they felt a strong wind gusting at them. They paused, gasping as they turned to see All Might engaged in combat with Nomu. Mineta said, "Are you guys seeing this?" He grinned and said, "That suplex looked like a huge explosion." "All Might's on a whole other level," Suyu said, "and yet he still has to look at his notes when he's..." "Huh?" she asked, observing Izuku's anxious expression. As he looked at her, she worriedly said, "Deku? Are you okay?" He asks, "Remember when we were reading the hero news this morning while we were on the train to school?" And she nods. In order to keep Mineta from hearing, he leans in at her ear and says, "Yeah, we saw the headline about All Might saving a lot of citizens. Why? Ribbit." She nods as he goes on, "Remember when 13 held up 3 fingers?" Suyu gasped. "That probably indicates All Might was already at his limit today." You mean?" Izuku said, nodding along. He muttered to Asui, who looked disturbed, "He must have used too much of his power for today. Ichi shouldn't be using one for all now." He informed her of All Might's wounded and his time limit, she recalls. All 3 of them gasped in surprise as Deku turned to face All Might and asked, "He's saving us, but at what cost?" The Nomu, who was halfway through Kurogiri's portal beneath the hero, grabbed All Might's flanks and forced him to bleed from his previous wound when he tried to backslam the Nomu into the ground. "Nice," said Shigaraki. He laughs and turns to face the warp villain. "You tried burying him in the concrete so he wouldn't move around anymore. Sorry, that won't work. Nomu's as strong as you are, that won't stop him. Nice work Kurogiri, we got him right where we want him now." After All Might yelled, "If this is your best, you've picked the wrong place to attack. You should just give up now." Tamura scratched his neck. He addressed his comrade, who informed All Might, "Kurogiri. Normally, I wouldn't want blood and corpse fragments to flood my warp gates, but for heroes like you, I'll make an exception." The 3 were taken aback by this. "No, I have to help him. The League of Villains is going to cut All Might in half." Izuku pondered for a moment before turning to face Su. "Asui, take Mr. Aizawa, I'm going to help All Might." She croaked in surprise. What? But... Deku She was cut off when Izuku gave Aizawa to her and started running towards the fight. "Deku, hold on," she shouted, trying to stop him but couldn't leave Mineta alone with their injured teacher. She tried to think of something but to her surprise, Shota started to float. "Huh? Go, Su." She turns to find Ochako telling her, "I'll take him to safety," while employing her quirk. She's smiling at her. Suyu croaks with a smile and started hopping after Izuku on all 4s. "Are you both crazy?" As Izuku kept sprinting in the direction of the symbol of peace, Mineta said, "All Might. I won't let them kill you. I still have a lot I want to learn from you," he thought. This cannot be the conclusion, it simply cannot. He yelled as he approached, "I'm coming." Hearing this, All Might turns and gasped, seeing Izuku approach. "Midoriya, no. What are you doing, in your opinion?" Izuku was jumping and screaming when he yelled. But the warp villain suddenly materialized in front of him. Just as Katsuki jumps at the warp villain with a fist looped back, Suyu stops Kurogiri from opening another warp gate for Izuku by using her tongue to wrap around her boyfriend and pull him away. How foolish. He then uses his quirk to blast Kurogiri, causing him to grunt. Looking at the 2 green-haired lovers, Bakugo says, "Deku, Frogface, don't get in my way." He shouted to them while Asui holds Deku close to her and asked with a worried expression, "Are you okay?" He looks at his girlfriend in shock. "Asui? Why do you not go out?" Su was going to reply when they saw Bakugo pinning Kurogiri to the ground with his palm on the warp villain's metal neck brace. At the same time, ice covered the ground in the direction of the Nomu, freezing half of its body from the right side and causing it to release its hold on All Might. Izuku and Suyu gasped as they followed the trail and saw it was Shoto, with half of his body covered in ice, staring straight at Kurogiri and Tamura. "One of your poorly trained thugs told me you're here because you think you can kill All Might," he said solemnly as All Might broke free from the Nomu's grasp and leapt out, landing next to Todoroki, clutching his injured side and moaning in agony. "Are you all right?" asked Asui, helping Deku stand up, both seeing Kirishima jump forward to attack Tamura. However, he moved out the way, avoiding the attack. "Damn. That was going to be awesome." As she retreated from the villain, Kirishima sighed and remarked, "I guess I discovered your body that time, you smoky bastard." With an almost malevolent smile, Kachan yelled, Asui, you shouldn't have come back. Izuku watched, clutching Tsuyu in his arms. Like I said, Deku, I'm not leaving your side, he whispered anxiously as she looked at him and rested her head on his chest. Ribbit. Midoriya then glared at Shigaraki, who was the only villain standing at the moment. Kurogiri, he started, how could you let this brat get the best of you? She smiled at him, and he smiled back and nodded. The symbol of peace will not be defeated by delinquents like you. Shoto said in his usual tone, with everyone standing their ground. Kachan. Everyone. Izuku said, tears welling in his eyes before he wiped them away, maintaining his smile, knowing that All Might would be okay now. We're in serious trouble because of you. Hey, Bakugo says, smirking at Tamura before turning back to Kurogiri. You are a stupid villain who is irresponsible, it wasn't hard to figure you out. While the explosive blonde tells how he found out the warp villain has a physical form, Shoto looks at Midoriya and Asui, noticing the way how Midoriya is holding Asui in his hands with her body pressing against his. They're together. As he thinks about the two, he asks himself, if they are, they should keep their focus on the battle, they can't get distracted. He turns to face the villains and says, fools. Before he sees Bakugo detonating a little explosion on Kurogiri's neck brace. Remain motionless. Doesn't sound pretty heroic. Tamura interrupted, saying, they escaped without serious injuries and captured two of my strongest men. Kids these days are truly amazing. If you try anything funny, I'll blow your ass up so bad that they'll be piecing you together for weeks. He shifts his focus to the anti-symbol of peace. Nomu. At the sound of its name, the villain slowly emerges from the warp gate, startling everyone as Izuku holds Tsuyu close to him. They make the League of Villains look like amateurs, can't have that. When Nomu looked at the group and let his right arm and leg break apart, they were even more shocked. No way. Izuku whispered, how's it still moving? Before everyone heard All Might yell, Tsuyu said, stay back, everyone. They do so, watching as the Nomu started regenerating a new arm and leg. What is this? I thought you said his power was shock absorption. I didn't say that was his only quirk, he also has super regeneration. All Might asked. Nomu has been modified to take you on, even 100% of your power. Hei's basically a highly efficient punching bag that hits back. Itamura corrects him. The group returned to fighting position after the Nomu had grown back missing limbs. Asui did the same, but to her surprise, Izuku stood in front of her and said, I'm sorry Asui, no matter what you say, I'm going to keep you safe. She croaked, her face flushed, until they heard Tamura say, first we need to free our only method of escape. Get him Nomu. Suddenly, a strong gust of wind sent everyone flying back a little. With a gasp, Tsuyu opened her closed eyes and stood up, and shortly after, she saw that Izuku had shielded her from the blast beneath her. Are you okay? With a laugh and some back discomfort, he asks, I'm okay Deku, Ribbit. But are you? She asked as deep down, her heart was melting at the fact Midoriya is protecting her. She hugs him tightly making him yelp with his face turning a rosy red as Asui pull away with a croak. Sorry. Ribbit. However, thank you. She grinned and got to her feet, assisting him in standing up as he sighed. Tsuyu blushed once again as Izuku said, it's okay, I wouldn't want my daughter getting hurt. But ow. Such force. Midoriya soon saw that Nomu was with the warp villain, but she didn't see Katsuki. Kachan. He called, thinking the Nomu may have hurt him but to everyone's surprise, Bakugo was sitting next to them looking shocked. Did you dodge him? Asui looked at her and said, shut up Frogface, I didn't. His response perplexed everyone. Then, how you get over here? Isn't it obvious? Ejiro questioned, raising his eyebrows till Shoto gasped. Observing his gaze, they turned to confront All Might, who had deflected Nomu's strike and managed to collapse a stone wall while remaining upright. All Might gasped and then coughed up blood. All Might. As the symbol of peace gazes at Tamura, Deku yelled, these are children, and you didn't hold back. Infuriated, he said, I didn't have much choice, to which Tamura replied, he was threatening my companion, and besides. These kids are no angels. Shigaraki glances at Midoriya, the unassuming one. To save that girl of his, he attempted to murder me with a maxed out punch. His girl? As Tamura goes on, Kirishima mumbled, glancing at Tsuyu and Izuku, who were holding hands tightly, what type of hero does something like that? He looks at All Might and says, you think you can get away with being as violent as you want if you pretend it's for the sake of others? Well, All Might. That annoys me. Why do some individuals believe that some violent deeds are terrible and others are good? Do you consider yourself a peace symbol? You are but another instrument of violence sponsored by the government, and violence fosters more violence. Once you're dead, I'll make sure everyone knows this. All Might started off by saying, "You're nothing but a maniac. Criminals like you usually attempt to make your actions sound heroic, but really, you're just doing this because you enjoy it, isn't that right?" And Kachan found the mist guy weakness. Izuku nods. And Bakugo stands up as Eijiro spoke. "These dudes may act tough, but now we can take them down with All Might's help. Now let's do this." He then hardens his hands. He asked Tamura, who Shoto glares at. Asui had to stop them for Deku's safety since she can't believe what she's hearing. She prods his shoulder to catch his attention and says, "Deku. We shouldn't?" All Might interrupts, saying, "Don't assault." To the surprise of most, he said, "Get out of here. Remember that if it weren't for me, you would have been in trouble sooner." Todoroki glances at the hero who raises a fist and smiles broadly. "It's gonna be alright. Just sit back and watch a pro at work." "You need our help," remarked Shoto, getting ready to battle before All Might informed him. "I thank you for your assistance, but this is different." Izuku informs him, "But you're bleeding and too sore. And you're almost out of..." He's interrupted by Suyu's startled croak, causing him to gasp once more. He should remember not to say that in public. All Might gave him the thumbs up at that moment, as Su was holding Izuku's hand. "Deku, let's go. Please." She then drew him away as he sighed. "Oh, okay." He nodded, trailing behind his girlfriend and others until they heard Tamura say, "Nomu. Kurogiri. Kill him." Midoriya gasped and turned fiercely, placing Asui behind him. "I'll take care of the kids." Izuku's body began to shine again as he heard Tamura dash towards the five, putting Midoriya, Bakugo, Todoroki, and Kirishima in combat position while Eijiro warned the four, "Heads up, we're fighting after all. Let's clear this level and go home." All Might and the Nomu were about to calm him down when they both charged at each other and punched each other's fists, sending everyone reeling back. "Deku. Please?" he thought, clenching his fists and teeth, with only Asui noticing the glow on his body. Suyu spontaneously stood up, stuck herself to the ground, and wrapped her tongue around her boyfriend, keeping him close. "I got you, Ribbit." They hear Shigaraki talk as she draws him up close to her. "Did you not hear me?" "Shock absorption is one of his abilities," All Might shouted back. "Yeah. How about it?" He and Nomu then kept punching each other. When they returned to Su and the composed Deku, he put his arm around her and held her close. "Thank you, Asui," he said, glancing at the fighting. "But he's going to take on that smartass guy head-on." He kept his grip, not letting go of Suyu. The gusts of wind between the symbol and anti-symbol of peace punches were too powerful. "I suppose so, Ribbit. Can he defeat him, though?" she questioned him. "Wow, they move so quickly," Eijiro exclaimed, being blown back a little along with Shoto. "No, I can't get in touch with them." Pushing back to Tamura's side, Kurogiri screamed. "He stated your quirk is shock absorption, not nullification. That implies that there is a limit to how much you can consume, correct?" shouted All Might, continuing his attack on Nomu, who was being knocked back until it managed to hit the pro-hero's weak spot. "Gah!" All Might moaned in agony but continued to push forward, knocking Nomu back even further and sending trees and other debris flying in all directions. "So, huge guy, you were created to fight me? Then I'll have to go beyond that and force you to surrender." All Might yelled, and Tamura gasped with wide eyes, "If you can really withstand me firing at 100% of my power." His punches started to go even faster. The Nomu's pupils shrunk, it was overwhelmed, unable to keep up as more punches hit it. Asui was in awe. "He's fantastic." As he continues, Suyu turns to face him. "Those aren't just random punches either. They're targeted, and every single one of them." Izuku nodded. "But he's giving it his all, despite being injured." There was a flashback of All Might punching the sludge villain. "Is more than 100% of his power," Asui said, finishing his sentence, and he nodded. Suyu croaked in surprise, knowing how bad one for all could get because Izuku had previously warned her that if All Might used too much, he would have to transform into his weak form. Boom. A real hero, they said as the Nomu grabbed the ground and threw itself at All Might to attack, only to be struck back. "We'll always find a way for justice to be served." The sound caught their attention, causing everyone to gasp as they saw the Nomu fly back from All Might's punch. While the Nomu was in the air, All Might landed in front of it. All Might blocked the Nomu's attack, knocking it back before stomping it to the ground, making it spring in the air. Nomu lunges for him, but he is caught and hurled to the ground so hard that it leaves a large crater. "Now for a lesson," says the symbol of peace, rising to his feet. "You may have heard these words before, but I'll show you what they really mean. Go beyond." He puts his fist in his hand, causing it to glow, and pulls his arm back. Plus, he strikes the Nomu. Ultra. The students watching in awe as he yelled. Abruptly, a flash of light burst from his fist, sending the Nomu flying through the USJ's dome, blowing up the lights, and shaking the building as the Nomu flew through the clouds until he was a sparkle in the sky. He completely destroyed his shock absorption with that move, which was akin to the final move in a video game. Kirishima remarked, "I've never witnessed such a display of physical might." While Bakugo spoke, Izuku wasn't paying attention. Right now he's looking at Tsuyu, seeing if she's alright. "Are you sure you're okay?" She blushed a deep crimson as he held her arms and searched her face for scratches and bruises. "I'm good, Deku, really. Ribbit." She smiled and said, "Besides, I should be asking you if you're okay. You have 2 broken fingers, remember?" Midoriya blushed and laughed. "Oh, right." He could still feel the snot she had put on his left palm. "He did it, Asui." Izuku grinned as he turned to face All Might through the smoke. "Ribbit, ribbit. I really have gotten weaker." Asui agreed while croaking and clutching his arm near her. "Back in my heyday, 5 hits would have been enough to knock that guy out, but today it took more than 300 mighty blows," All Might said, wheezing. When Asui spotted smoke rising from his body, he turned to face them and smiled. "Deku, look." Asui whispered to Izuku, who was pointing at Toshinori. "Smoke's coming from his body. He's out of time." With a gasp, Deku thought, "Oh no. She's right. All Might confront Tomuru and Kurogiri. Give up, villains. We all want this to end as soon as possible." Tamura began to scratch his neck, saying angrily, "He cheated. Come on, what's going on here? He's as strong as ever. For heaven's sake, don't tell me I was misled." "What's the matter?" Tamura turns to face All Might, who goes on gravely, "Are you not berating me? You previously stated that you would pass this level, didn't you? Well, if you dare, come get me." Shigaraki gasped in fear, but Izuku knows All Might doesn't have a lot of time left. "Deku." He is startled out of his reverie and turns to face Tsuyu, who is looking anxious. "We need to help All Might." Midoriya gasped in surprise, but she was correct. He cannot continue to exist in his muscular form indefinitely. When Eijiro puts a hand on Su's shoulder, she croaks. "Asui, Midoriya, let's," Tsuyu tells him. "Call me Su, please." She gently removes his hand from her shoulder. "Right," Kirishima nods. "Sorry, Su." For some reason, she doesn't like to be touched by anyone other than Deku. "Come on, though. Let's get back together with the others." Asui was too preoccupied with Deku, who was concerned for All Might, to pay any attention. "The last thing we want is to be taken hostage or to get in his way." He whispered to her, "Asui. He can't beat them, he's bluffing, he's out of time." Tsuyu puts her finger on her cheek, trying to think of a way to help the hero, but it's risky because if they attack, All Might will have to transform into his weak form, putting them in danger. All Might speaks, and she is soon pulled from her reverie. "What? Are you afraid?" Kurogiri's eyes widen as Shigaraki jumps a little in terror and then sighs, scratching his neck once more while panting. "If only Nomu had been here, he would have come at you right now and pounded you into the ground without thinking twice." Before Kurogiri leaned in and talked to him, Tamura yelled fiercely, "Shigaraki, please do not fret. All power has waned." They both gazed to see All Might's corpse smoldering while standing in one place, proving that Nomu's strikes were successful. "The children are frozen in fear, and look, our allies are recovering," Kurogiri said to Tamura as Izuku, who couldn't hear them, observed the other villains were beginning to awaken. "The arrival of reinforcements is probably a few minutes away. Together, we can take advantage of this final opportunity to eliminate All Might." Shigaraki stopped scratching and brought his hands away from his neck. "You're right. It's this. We must do it immediately, we have no other option. Look, the boss at the end is right here. Asui, please leave this place, right now." Startling Tsuyu, Izuku said, "Ribbit." "What?" As Bakugo and Kirishima brace themselves against the baddies, Shoto looks at them and asks, "Will you two be joining us?" "But I'm not leaving you, Deku." She grabs his arm anxiously. "We both know what's happening to All Might," he murmured, "and there's no way he can move faster than the warp villain now." He received no response as the two ignored him. "Asui," began Midoriya, bending down to her height. "I have to help him, and please, I don't want to lose you. Asui stared at him for a few seconds before letting out a sorrowful sigh and croaking, "Ribbit." Before feeling him take her hands in his. "Thank you, Froppy," she said, nodding tearfully. Izuku grinned, then turned to face the villains, and soon saw Shigaraki charge at All Might in a fit of wrath. "Think about this retaliation for what you did to Nomu," he said, receiving a nod and a kiss on the cheek. "Please, be careful," he asked Sue with another croak before jumping back to the class on top of the stairs with the others attempting to assist them. Kurogiri also charges at All Might, who grunts and does his best to maintain his muscular form. "I need support," the hero thought before in a flash, Izuku appears in between them. Deku had jumped with the help of One for All, shocking the others, even Asui, who looked back and saw this. And no. Observing that his legs were now fractured, she thought, "Whoa, Midoriya," said a surprised Kirishima before he and the others saw Asui jump towards him. "Deku," she shouts, going after him as he nears Kurogiri. Seeing this, Izuku reels his right arm back, ready to save the symbol of peace. "Don't you hurt him. What a naive villain you are." When Deku yelled, the warp villain opened a second warp gate, enabling Tamura to extend his hand and touch Izuku's face. "I will not be duped by it again," shouted Kurogiri. Asui had tears build up in her eyes. "Deku, no." Shigaraki's hand was close to Midoriya's face as the villain laughed evilly, but through their teeth, a gunshot was heard, causing Tamura's hand to be pierced and knocked away. Asui quickly grabs Midoriya and brings him to her arms as they both fall on the floor with a hard thud, while Katsuku, Eijiro, and Shoto gasp, all trying to see where the shot came from. She wasn't going to reach him in time by hand, so she shot her tongue out to grab and pull him away. As their professors appeared, the number one hero said, "They're here." Nezu then spoke, and he apologized to everyone. Ochako started crying and then exclaimed, "It's Iida. I realize we're a little late, but I got the professors here as quickly as I could." "Your class representative has returned," exclaims the aforementioned student. "I have done my job. I also brought reinforcements." The pros and villains stared at one another before they started attacking, with the heroes being victorious. Suyu smiled as she sighed in relief. "We're safe, Deku." She smiled but noticed he wasn't responding. "Ribbit?" Though she blushes when she realizes that his knees are broken and that his face is crimson and pushed between her breasts, she truly enjoyed it and quickly sat up, supporting him on her lap with his back. "Are you okay?" Tamura walks back to the warp villain, holding his wounded hand, saying, "Aw man, the pros are here. It's game over," as he looks at Kurogiri. "Let's go home and try this awe." Deku nodded and smiled before groaning in pain, which made Sue cry because she finds it painful to see him hurt like this. As his partner shielded him with his warp gate, Tamura fell after being pierced by bullets from pro-hero Snipe's arms and legs. Snipe, who is still firing, said, "We need someone who can catch them from a distance." "I'm on it." Spoke 13, utilizing Black Hole once more, said, "Let's go." Oh no, Kurogiri felt himself being pulled in 13 and realized what it was. "Black Hole? I might not have been able to kill you this time," Shigaraki said as the two criminals fled, the quirk being insufficient to apprehend them. "But you're running out of time. All power. A sign of harmony. You will be killed by me." He and Kurogiri then disappeared. Now that most of the villains had been apprehended, Izuku was still on Suyu's lap, grinning in agony as he looked at All Might. "Asui, I couldn't do it. I wasn't there to help him. I'm sorry." She was about to say something to him, but All Might interrupted her, saying, "That's not true." They both looked at him in half of his weak form, grinning. "You bought me a few vital seconds. If not for that, I'd be dead now. Young Midoriya. You saved me once again." This made Izuku smile again, and he began to cry a little before hearing Suyu sniffle, which made him gasp. "Are you okay, Asui? Are you in pain?" She interrupts. "I was afraid I would lose you, Deku." Her boyfriend gasped in a little agony as she gave him a tight, tearful hug, but he didn't mind. "Hey, it's okay, it's over now," he said, hugging her. "I'm just happy you and All Might are okay." Suyu smiled and pulled away, still crying. "Please, Deku. Don't ever do that again." She begged him, "Please," and he gently wiped away her tears. He laughed a little until they looked at each other, and then Asui leaned in slowly as Deku did the same, their lips meeting in an open kiss that their teacher and class noticed. All Might couldn't help but smile, and Kirishima stared at the two back-to-back in shock, while Bakugo was too preoccupied to care about their relationship, and Shoto didn't seem to mind. Back at the exit, Ochako was thanking Ida for saving them when they heard Jiro yell, "Oh my, guys look." Momo, Kaminari, Toru, and the majority of their dispersed class arrived before they and the others already at the exit looked to see where Kyoko was pointing. Momo, Mina, and Toru all gasped, as did Ochako and the other students, when they saw Izuku and Tsuyu sharing a slow, passionate kiss while Izuku remained on Tsuyu's lap. Ah! The sight made the girls swoon. "Oh, how adorable! They have fallen in love," shouted Mina, who was grinning happily as Ochako smiled and thought to the two. "Way to go, guys." Meanwhile, the guys just stood there, some of them were surprised or impressed. Kaminari was still in his power shortage state to even notice since he overused his electricity quirk. As for Mineta, he got on his knees, tears falling from his eyes and onto the floor. No fair. How come he gets Sue? Envious that Izuku had a gorgeous girlfriend before him, he yelled, sobbing. Returning to the location of All Might before Kirishima rushed over to Izuku and Tsuyu, whose lips were still locked, Shoto told him, if all the pro-professors are gathered here, that must imply the rest of the school is safe. The villains targeted this facility but not the rest of the campus. Midoriya. Sue. Hello. The two broke their kiss and looked at Eijiro. Sorry. Asui shouted to Kirishima, who continued to run in their direction. Deku can't get up. What, is he okay? All Might smiled and thought. Ah, Kirishima, in response to his question. I'm happy to see that he's protecting his pals, but hold on. The symbol of peace stood close to Asui and Midoriya, realizing that he had reverted to his slender form. Oh crap. He will discover my secret if he comes over here. Bad. As he was in silent panic, the two lovers noticed the look on his face and gasped, also realizing what's going to happen. Kirishima, wait. They yelled simultaneously, and Eijiro gasped in shock as a huge wall of stone erupted between him and the three. It is later discovered that the pro-hero, Cementos, was the cause. Young man, please remain back for your own protection. When Cementos was done, Eijiro smiled and said, oh, gotcha. Join your classmates at the front gate and leave the injured to us. We can take care of them. I'm working on it. The three sighed in relief as he hurried back to Bakugo and Todoroki, waving an arm and telling them what Smontos had told him. That was too close, he said, adding that if the pro hadn't arrived in time, another student would have discovered All Might's actual appearance. All Might drops to one knee as Cementos approaches. Thanks for that. My pleasure, the aforementioned pro remarked, grinning and putting his hands together. You saved my back, Cementos. We should sneak you out of here and get you free to the nurse's office, he says, glancing at the two pupils and himself. I'm actually a great fan of yours. Really, All Might, that might have been deadly. Toshinori glances down. I had to take a risk, or else we would have already perished. It only serves to highlight how formidable those villains were. Izuku turns to face Tsuyu after he is done. Asui, that was very close. He waited for a response but got nothing. Asui. After a few seconds, he heard a tired croak. Looking, he gasped, seeing Sue hold on to him, looking drowsy. Ribbit ribbit. Thinking something's wrong with her, he held her with his good arm worriedly. Asui. What's the matter? He asked, shaking her a little as she only looks at him, but doesn't answer. Cementos walks over and checks on her. She's just exhausted. She will be fine, young man, so don't worry. Though relieved, he was still concerned. Midoriya stared at Asui, who gave him a weary look in return, which made him cry. It's my fault. He thought as he gave her a tight hug, something she couldn't do. I should have persuaded her to return with the others, but why didn't I? As he held Tsuyu in his arms, Izuku started to cry, and All Might attempted to comfort him. Afterwards, Uraraka was looking up at the sky in sadness as the students discussed the villains and where they were teleported to. The police arrived, took away the villains left behind, and even found the Nomu not far from the USJ. Surprisingly, it went with them without any problems. The police then started telling everyone in Class 1A that their classmates Izuku, Tsuyu, and teacher All Might would be okay, that they just needed to be healed by Recovery Girl, while their homeroom teacher Mr. Aizawa was in the hospital receiving emergency treatment for the damage he sustained from the Nomu, while their other teacher, 13, was being fixed. How are you? If you're worried about Sue and Midoriya, then don't worry. He smiles reassuringly and says, they're in good hands. She turns to see Iida approaching her with anxiety. Uraraka grinned and nodded to him, saying, I know. Thanks, Iida. They then heard some of their classmates discussing the two, saying, can you believe that Izuku's dating Sue? Why is he so fortunate to find someone as attractive as her? I'm surprised that those two are together, Denki said. drawing a scowl from the girls in his class. I can't help but agree. Zero joins in, saying, you know, I have to give Midoriya credit, he says, looking up at Sato. It's unbelievable that he had a girlfriend all along. That doesn't mean they can become sidetracked while training. But sure, good for them, Tokiyami said after Rikido nodded. In the meantime, the girls were speaking among themselves, some of them excited. Oh my gosh, together, they looked adorable. I know, Toru said joyfully as Momo nodded. But I wonder why they never disclosed their relationship to anyone. Indeed, what would be the reason for them to keep it from us? When Ochako responded, Mina said, come on, guys, it's their personal life, pointing out as they turned to face her. That's why they haven't told anyone, she said, adding that it's none of our concern. Once she was done, she listened, and the girls nodded in accord. Yeah, you're right. Mina smiled as they continued their conversation. Uraraka sighed, knowing they wouldn't stop. In the meantime, after being healed by Recovery Girl, All Might, Izuku, and Tsuyu were in their beds in the UA nurse's office. However, Izuku asked Recovery Girl if he could share a bed with Tsuyu, and Recovery Girl agreed. Asui received a little healing from Recovery Girl to combat her fatigue, and Midoriya got her to lie on his chest so she could take a nap. Ribbit. Ribbit. Deku smiled when he heard her snore like that, and he put his arm around Tsu, holding her close and letting her sleep. Recovery turned to All Might, who had spoken to her, and said, well, I guess I won't scold you for Midoriya and Asui being back here since it wasn't your fault. I can't be sure yet, but I think I shortened my time limit again with that fight. Izuku looked at him anxiously as he went on. I hope I can at least still hold the form for an hour. All Might sighed as Midoriya glanced at Asui before turning to him. I'm so sorry. Izuku felt bad for the symbol of peace, who slowly sat up. Well, no use worrying, these things happen. This is all my fault, Izuku said, letting Deku see his bandage where his wounded was. I shouldn't have, Asui, who was just beginning to wake up, interrupted him before he could finish, saying, Deku. She gives him a weary face as she asks, are we at the nurse's office? Is our class going well? Ribbit. Her eyes were half open as her boyfriend gasped and smiled. Asui? Are you okay? I was so worried, he said, cradling her. He responds to her inquiries, also, yes, we're in the nurse's office and our class is safe. He starts to cry a little. You weren't answering after our teachers saved us. I thought something happened to you. Sue interrupts Izuku once more, kissing him on the lips this time. The kiss caused Izuku to flush deeply red, especially since All Might and Recovery Girl saw it. Tsuyu croaks and nestles her head into Midoriya's chest, saying, you're so loud sometimes, Deku. She smiles and tells him, I'm okay. I was just tired, I just needed rest. Ribbit. He laughed and said, sorry about that. Then he saw that Asui was yawning and making some croaking noises, which made him smile and kiss her head, making her blush. Get much rest you need, Froppy. She nodded and hugged him as he did the same. As they were falling asleep, All Might's detective friend entered and explained the situation to him and Recovery Girl, but in a low voice because the green-haired lovers were sound asleep in each other's arms. Izuku could hear them, but he doesn't care right now because he really wants to sleep with Asui in his arms. Both Tsuyu and Izuku were still dressed as heroes as they made their way upstairs to their room in the apartment complex. Tsuyu was wearing his costume, while Izuku was only wearing the blue jumpsuit because his outfit was still being repaired. Since she didn't want to remain at the school for very long after what had transpired at the USJ, his partner wasn't really interested in changing. Once the two had recovered, Inko had come to pick them up from school. Izuku has been accustomed to his injuries over the past several occasions, so he doesn't really feel any pain from them anymore. At the moment, Deku and Asui were congratulating one another on their successful first-time battles against villains. They even chuckled when he unintentionally landed face first on her breast, blushing as a result. Yeah, said Midoriya. He blushed nervously and said, even when everyone saw us kissing. I mean, even the teachers saw it. When they go back to school in a few days, he fears what might occur. Ribbit, yeah, concurred Sue. He laughed a little as she smiled reassuringly and said, but I'm sure there's nothing to worry about. I'm pretty sure the principal will allow us to remain in the same class. Ribbit. She noted that Midoriya was wearing a phony smile as she said, yeah. You're right, Asui. He glances at her and asks, Deku? Yeah? He inquired, still grinning, as she took off her gloves in Inko's car and held his hand tenderly. The woman tapped her face and continued, at the USJ, you said that guy covered in hands. Shigaraki was it? You said he's the one from your nightmares? Her boyfriend, who was only a few steps from their apartment next to his mother's room, stopped dead in his tracks when he heard the question. He glances at Asui, who is wearing a troubled expression. He halted when he saw a mental image of Shigaraki caressing Suyu's face and saw her dissolve to dust. I'm not so sure. I mean, he looked similar to the villain in my nightmare, even when he grabbed. Izuku thought, and no. As he shook off the vision, covering his mouth with tears streaming from his eyes as his body trembled. Asui, who was holding his arm, gave him a croak and a gasp. Deku, it's okay, she said once more. As she gently escorted him to their new apartment, she reassured him, I'm still here with you, I'm safe. They unlocked the door and entered, but they stopped after just 2 steps, gasping. Their apartment's inside is lovely. It already has a polished kitchen, a large HD TV, a green couch, and a few chairs. The floors have even been scrubbed and left immaculate. Izuku exclaimed, "Whoa." And Suyu nodded in accord. Suyu noticed some green paint on the walls and said, "Ribbit, yeah." Izuku opened the bathroom door while surveying the area and was surprised to see that it was rather larger than the one in his mother's apartment. There was even a walk-in shower, large enough for him and Asui to take a shower together. He blushed at the mere notion of that. After closing the door, he watched Suyu enter the bedroom. He followed her inside and almost gasped when he saw their king-size bed, TV, laptop desk, and even some frog-shaped pillows that belonged to Asui. Asui broke the pause with a compliment, "Your mom is amazing." Deku grinned and nodded. Then she turns to face him and says, her cheeks turning pink. We could have our private moments now." She grinned, and he yelled and flushed as well. His face turned hot as she approached him and held his hands, forcing them to meet eyes. After that, they bend in to kiss, holding each other tight as their lips connect. They pulled away for air after 10 seconds of this. Suyu's smile dimmed when she noticed Izuku was sorrowful and staring at the floor. Shigaraki, the villain in that nightmare, killed everyone in it. He must be thinking about how he nearly lost his love, who put her hands on Izuku's cheeks to gain his attention and make him look at her while she restored her grin. He gasped, his face flushed. "Deku? Wanna go take a shower with me?" Asui suggested, her tongue out and a charming smile on her face. "You could help me remove my costume if you want?" Unsure of what to say, Izuku said, I Despite his desire to accompany her, he is unable to do so because of the feelings he still harbors following the events at the USJ. Before telling him, Asui gave him a cheek kiss. She went to the drawers and took out a black short, a Deku shirt, and a pair of green underwear. "I'll wait for you in the shower. Take your time, okay?" she said. Izuku took note of this and pondered. He smiled as he watched Sue approach the door, but before she could go to the restroom, she turned to wink at him and give him a blown kiss. "She loves wearing my shirts, huh?" he asked. Midoriya sighed as she went to the restroom and sat dejectedly on his bed. He knows that Tamura was the same person from his nightmares who killed him and Asui, and he simply cannot stop thinking about it. After examining his hands, he sighed and lay on the bed, thinking, if he is. What could that mean? Before long, he became aware of something that drew his attention. He noticed Sue's phone, which was turned on, at the corner of the bed. He reaches for her phone and asks, "Huh?" As he was removing her phone, he thought, she must have forgotten to turn it off. However, before he could do so, he saw something on the screen. There were pictures of him and Asui together. Some were selfies, some showed them kissing. One caught his eye was a picture of them on the beach when they first met. Midoriya was intrigued and grinned as she browsed the pictures on the phone. When he sees one of him sleeping shirtless on the sand with Suyu next to him, he recalls that they were sleeping together by accident since he was so exhausted at the time. There's even a picture of them getting ice cream together after his right arm was hurt on the second day of school, and he can see that Sue's nose is coated in ice cream. He giggled before swiping to another picture that made him flush because it showed him wearing trunks and Asui in a green bikini. After a few moments, he notices that this picture is actually a recording from months ago and swipes once more. Even though he knows not to peek at her privacy, he couldn't resist pressing the button to begin the video, which shows Suyu grinning in her room before they were together. Today was amazing. "Ribbit, I got to see him again," Asui said, referring to her pal. "I have to thank you for this, Habuko. Ribbit. You've helped me gain the courage to talk to Izuku. You even helped me get along with him by being myself." She breathed deeply. "He's so cute, I'm so happy to have a best friend. He's a marvelous person. Ribbit. I wonder if he'll feel the same way for me when I tell him my feelings." She was worried. Suyu looks away, blushing, and puts a hand exactly where her heart is. Izuku blushed and grinned as the movie came to a conclusion. I I just feel like we could be more than just friends. He puts the phone down and joyfully looks up at the ceiling. I shouldn't worry anymore, he murmured to himself. He quickly gets up and removes the top of his blue jumpsuit, exposing his muscles, before leaving the room, saying, "We made it out of the USJ thanks to All Might. So, I should be celebrating with her." In the meantime, in the restroom, Asui gazes at her image in the mirror. She hums and reaches for the bow of her green hair, releasing it from its tie and allowing it to fall freely behind her, below her knees. Suyu blushed as she looked in the mirror once again, wondering if Izuku would think she looked lovely. She sighed in worry, assuming Izuku wouldn't join her in the shower. She turned to see Deku arrive shirtless, blushing as the bathroom door opened just as she was ready to take off her belt. Midoriya surprises her by picking her up bridal style, which makes her face flush. "Oh, Deku or Yo Ribbit," she exclaims. Before long, Sue realized he was grinning at her. Not any smile, though. It was a nice and hopeful smile. Without giving her a chance to react, he walked her into the shower and said, "Ready for our shower, Asui?" She was too preoccupied, almost enthralled by his toned arms and six-pack. Izuku quickly gets her up and walks over to shut the shower's glass doors. Sue asked introspectively as she blushed uncontrollably since she was still dressed in her costume and Deku was still wearing his jumpsuit pants. He's still wearing it. Midoriya laughed uneasily when she realized he was still wearing the pants after Asui tapped her finger on her cheek. He was about to pull his pants down when his girlfriend yawned, appearing a little drowsy and worried about her boyfriend. "Oh, I can't believe I forgot to take this off," he inquired. "Are you okay?" And she nodded. Midoriya nods and grins at her, saying, "I'm a little tired, but don't worry, I'll be alright when we turn the water on." After that, he removes his pants and underwear to reveal his member, which causes Asui to croak in a redder glow. He looks at his member as he throws his pants out of the shower and shuts the door. He notices that she is focusing on his lower body when he looks at her. Gah! He pulls his clothes up. "Oh crap, sorry." Izuku gave an apology. "What was I thinking? I'll go in." He was unable to finish before Suyu got between his knees and gave him a gentle shove on the shower seat. She smiles at him and says, "Deku, I told you, it's okay." Suyu began to feel Izuku's muscles as she moved her hands up to his chest, saying, "You're my boyfriend, and I did ask you to shower with me. So relax, Ribbit." "Oh okay," laughs Izuku. "Just let me turn on the—" He pauses as he watches Suyu turn on the shower with her tongue, causing the showerhead to spray them with perfectly heated fresh water. Since Asui is still wearing her costume, the water is hitting his body, but at least it is hitting her head. Izuku concluded, "Water." Izuku grinned as he used his hands to examine her skin-tight physique. Gently pressing her breasts together while feeling from her legs up to her thighs, hips, stomach, and chest. Suyu groaned and looked into his eyes before kissing him on the lips as he returned the kiss. "Our Ribbit, Deku." Izuku grabbed her costume belt through it and removed it off her waist, setting it aside because her suit is waterproof. Gazing into one another's eyes, the two withdrew from their kiss. "You're so beautiful. And hot, Froppy." Surprised, Suyu croaks, "He called me Froppy again." She thought, grinning as her face began to flush again. She continues by saying, "My Deku, you're very cute, Ribbit." Asui raises her arms, perplexing Midoriya until she realizes and gasps, Could you help me?" He nods and carefully reaches for the hem of her costume top, pulling it up to reveal more of her smooth and delicate skin. Sure," he says. Asui gasped as her top was taken off entirely and placed next to her belt, revealing her tummy along with her breast, which had bounced a little after being released. "Ribbit." She blushes and looks away, opening her chest slightly to allow him to gaze at her as much as he desires. Midoriya surprises Asui by grabbing the sides of her tight jeans and slowly pulling them down while supporting herself by holding onto his shoulder. Asui lifts both of her legs to assist Midoriya in carefully removing and setting them aside, leaving them both bare naked. "Sorry about that." Midoriya wiped her cheeks and neck gently till she obtained the sponge. Suyu then begins cleaning her boyfriend's powerful body, beginning with his stomach and chest. She blushed and continued, "Might as well wash your body too, Ribbit." He laughed uneasily. He feels his girlfriend washing his arms as she tells him, "Oh, no you don't really have to, Asui." "Deku, I want to. After everything you've done for me at the USJ, I really want to wash your body, while you wash mine." Suyu grins. After giving her a quick glance, Midoriya puts his hand on her chin and forces her to meet his eyes. A few minutes later after finishing, the two left the restroom and went to their room to change together. Izuku asked, "Are you sure you want to change with me, Asui?" As she noticed Tsuyu smiling and holding her clothes. "I'm sure, Ribbit." After they arrived at their bedroom, Izuku chose his outfit, and the two of them began putting it on. He saw that Asui was wearing black shorts, shoes, and one of his shirts, while Izuku was wearing black pants, shoes, and a white t-shirt. "You're wearing one of my shirts?" Tsuyu asks, croaking as she nods and examines the shirt she's wearing. Her cheeks were flushed as she said, "I like wearing your shirts sometimes." She told him, "That's okay. Honestly, it looks nice on you." He congratulated her. Izuku paused to think before responding, "Thank you. What should we do now?" Tsuyu smiles and looks at him, saying, "We could make something eat together." "That sounds good." As they exited their bedroom, the two went to their apartment's kitchen. When they opened the refrigerator, they gasped in surprise to discover that it was stocked with food, including jello and strawberry milk, Asui's favorite. His partner croaked a nod as he said, "Oh, man. Mom really filled up the fridge." After looking around, Midoriya quickly takes out 2 hot pizza pockets and says, "We should thank her tomorrow." "How does pizza pockets sound?" he asks, turning to Asui, who responds, "Sounds delicious." They closed the refrigerator, took out a plate, put the meal on it, and microwaved it for 4 minutes. While the pizza pockets are cooking, Deku gives Asui a questioning glance. Even though they recently took a shower, he is still concerned about her because she is prone to dehydration. "Hey, Asui." She tilts her head in his direction. He then asks her, "Ribbit?" Sue nods and smiles and asks, "Are you feeling better after the shower we had?" When he noticed her approaching, he said, "I feel great, especially after what we did." The two then shared a kiss. Sue invited him too after they kissed. Deku nodded and grinned, asking, "Are you feeling better after it too?" "Knowing that you're okay, yes." Beep. After he finished heating the pizza pockets, they turn to look at the microwave. When they open it, they see that the pizza pockets are smoking, indicating that they are done, as Tsuyu verified with a sniff. Izuku pulled out the plate and said, "Smells good." He then proceeded to the kitchen table but paused. As he asked, Tsuyu tilted her head in curiosity, saying, "Wait. Where did Mom get this table?" She asks, shrugging as she notices the table is brand new. "It could have been left here." They dismissed it without giving it much thought. After setting the meal on the table, Izuku goes to the refrigerator to obtain drinks for himself and her. He asked since he wasn't sure what to get her. She stared at the box and bottle before pointing, and he asked, "Asui, what would you like? Strawberry milk or water?" Izuku shuts the refrigerator and approaches Tsuyu, opening the milk box and giving it to her as they sit at the dinner table next to each other. "Strawberry milk, please." Ribbit. Curious, he asked her as he waited for the food to cool. She pauses her milk drink and responds, "Have you ever tried pizza pockets before?" "No. Pizza yes, but never pizza pockets." She asked, glancing at the dish. When she asked, Izuku nodded, "Are they really good?" He blushed a little in embarrassment, which made Tsuyu laugh. "Oh, yes they are. I've always had those whenever I see a movie. Alone." "Well, you're not alone anymore." Asui gives him a tight hug, pressing her arms into his chest and under his head, highlighting his flush. She smiled and said, "I'm here." Ribbit. Deku smiled back. He says, "Thanks." He then gives Asui a kiss on the top of her head, making her blush. They decided to check the pizza pockets after they had hugged, and Deku touched his, sensing that it was now warm. They both began eating together after saying, "They're warm now. We can eat." Tsuyu, who was enjoying the pizza pockets, tells Izuku after taking a few pieces. He laughed as he watched her eat, noticing how adorable it is. "They're really good." Izuku picked up the platter their meal was on and informed her that the two had devoured their pizza pockets together in a matter of minutes. As he takes the dish to the sink and washes it, she nods and smiles, saying, "I'll take care of this." After finishing, he yelled as he returned to the kitchen table and noticed that Tsuyu had slept off on the chair. Izuku thought as he anxiously approached Tsuyu, "Oh no." He carefully picked her up bridal style because he didn't want to leave her there, and to his amazement, she put her arms around him as she was sleeping. She slept with a lovely snore. Ribbit. Ribbit. Thankful that they left the door open, Izuku couldn't help but smile as he walks to their bedroom and enters. Before moving to his side, he carefully places Tsuyu on her side of the bed. Izuku discreetly slips into bed on his side and lies down after removing his shirt. Shortly afterward, Suyu turned and encircled him once more, surprising him by cuddling up to him while keeping her head resting on his chest. "Good night, Deku," she croaked again, muttering contentedly in her sleep. Izuku smiles and kisses the top of her head, making her smile as well. He switches off the lights and goes to sleep with Suyu in his arms. Hee. Good night, Asui. At night the green-haired couple is sleeping well in their king-sized bed, cuddling up to each other for warmth. Suyu lies in Izuku's arms, her head resting on his chest as she smiles while sleeping and croaking soft snores. But Midoriya was sweating a little, with drops of perspiration trickling down his brow, and he was trembling a little, not enough to wake Asui. He whispered in his sleep, "No. No. No." In his dream Izuku gasped as he opened his eyes. No. He realizes he's back at UA as he glances around. Hi once more. No, no, Izuku was frightened and forced to say no because he had been shown up close and personal with corpses all throughout the school, which sent shivers down his spine. The bodies were ripped apart, rotted, and left in a state beyond recognition. Blood was all over the area, and bones were visible through the ruined flesh. And not this again. Izuku shook in terror and retreated from the corpses in front of him. He questioned, "What's going on?" until he heard a sound he recognized. Even though it was feeble, Midoriya could easily identify the person. Ribbit. Izuku ran toward the sound of Sue's croaks, shouting, "Asui! Asui!" As he passed more dead, his gaze fixed on them. He notices that one has their face hunched over, the other has both eyes gone, and the jaw appears to have been torn off. Izuku wondered, "Why am I seeing this?" and shook it off until he reached Class 1A. This time, however, he saw Suyu in her hero outfit fending off the figure's silhouette, the same one from his last nightmare, with a menacing sneer. "No," was all he could say in disbelief as the evil figure threw Suyu at him once more, resembling the last nightmare in which he caught her, but they struck the wall behind them. Izuku gets back up and looks at Sue, who turns to face him and says something. She turns and rushes at the figure, but Midoriya tries to stop her. "Ribbit. I love you, Deku." "No." His eyes well up with tears. "Asui, don't." He approaches her and makes another attempt to move her aside, but it's too late. The figure touches Izuku and Suyu's faces with both hands, turning them to ash. From his dream Izuku opened his eyes, gasping for air, and started to breathe deeply. "Huh?" he asks as he turns to see that he has returned to his bedroom. "Oh good," he exhales comfortingly. He thought, just another nightmare. Until he heard some snores and croaks. "Ribbit. Ribbit." Sue is sleeping with her head resting still on his chest as she looks down. "Asui." He smiles, gives her a tight hug, and plants a kiss on her head. Since it was dark and she wasn't completely awake, this forced her to open one eye partly in order to see what was happening. But she croaked, "Our Ribbit." Midoriya kisses her head one more as she gently rests it on the cushion. Izuku laughed as she nodded slowly and fell back asleep, croaking and snoring once more. "Sorry, Froppy. I just need to use the bathroom." He thought, she's too cute. He gets out of bed softly, puts on one of his shirts, and leaves the bedroom as quietly as he can. After leaving, he sighs as he moves to the living room and settles down on the couch. He pretended to use the restroom, but in reality, he needed to get some fresh air after experiencing the same, more graphic nightmare. Izuku sighed again and asked himself, how do I make it stop? As he recalled that terrible dream in which he lost Suyu. In order to avoid losing the girl he knows and loves, he fervently wishes it doesn't happen. He will stop at nothing to keep her safe, but he wanted to shake this terrible feeling from his mind. He picks up his laptop from the coffee table, flips it on, and discovers it is 1 in the morning. With wide eyes, he thought, I haven't even slept that much. And then he sighed. Great. He turns to face the laptop and presses a button to start one of his favorite videos. A man behind the camera said, "Look, he's got more." Before All Might materialized next to a bus full of injured passengers. With his trademark smile, he said, "Ha ha ha, fear, not citizens. Hope has arrived. Because I am here." Deku grinned at this, then glanced at his hand. "Thank you, All Might, but why am I getting these nightmares now?" He pondered. He recalled how he had saved Suyu from Shigaraki by delivering the hit that spared his bones. He clenches his fist and asks, why does One for All activate whenever I see Asui in danger? He was thinking when he failed to see Asui, who had just woken up, saying, whatever it is, I need to tell him soon. As he continues to watch the footage, she approaches him till she croaks. Ribbit? Midoriya jumped at this sound. He looked back at her and exclaimed, "Ah!" Before pausing. "Asui?" He raised an eyebrow, but it was so dark that he could hardly identify her. He notices it was Suyu as he turns on the bulb next to him. He lets out a breath of relief when he notices that she is half sleeping and staring at him. "You scared me," he says with a small laugh. He gets up and cradles her in his arms, but she stares at his laptop. "But you shouldn't be up, you need rest." She tilts her head, curious to see what he's gazing at. "Ribbit?" Izuku smiled because he could relate to her curiosity. Additionally, Sue will occasionally just croak when she's extremely tired. He sat down and Asui sat next to him while he played a video of All Might protecting people. "Oh, I was just looking at a video of All Might. Wanna see?" he asked. She interrupts him, saying, "Sometimes I watch this." "Well, almost every day." She yawned and said, "Ribbit. Deku. Why aren't you in bed? What's wrong?" Izuku always wakes up in the middle of the night when something is amiss, so she knows something is off. She also finds it more comfortable to sleep in his arms because she cannot sleep without him. This surprises him, and he sighs as he examines his laptop. His tone was sad, causing Sue, who was now completely awake, to exclaim, I had another nightmare, the same one actually." He looks aside in tears as he says, I saw you there again. But again you were going to attack the villain and..." Because he was unable to express it, Suyu gave him an embrace, which he returned as she consoled him. Her hug gets a little tighter. "Deku, it's okay. Remember what I said?" she says. She kissed his cheek and allowed him to cry on her shoulder, saying, "I'm real. The nightmare isn't real. It's okay." He said, "I'm sorry." This confused Asui. She said, "For what?" "Ribbit." Deku withdrew, staring at her tearfully. "For not being strong enough to protect you at the USJ. He clarified. "Using one for all makes me useless if it keeps breaking my body. I can't even protect you out there. Only if I was strong enough I wouldn't have these nightmares of losing you. I'm a weakling." He breaks down and shocks Suyu. Although she was unaware of Izuku's feelings, she finds it painful to watch him in this state. She holds his face tenderly with her big hands. "Deku," she said. "You're not a weakling. You're stronger than you think, and you've always been there for me." She raises her head. A flashback then shows him striking the Nomu. "Don't you remember at the USJ? You protected me several times," he says. Izuku gasped as he heard, "You even used one for all on that Nomu without breaking any bones to save me." The fact that he hit the anti-symbol of peace with a one-for-all smash without suffering any injuries had entirely slipped his mind. He smiles as he examines the hand he used to punch. His smile fades as he turns to face Suyu. "I remember." Midoriya was about to cry when Asui shocked him by kissing him, causing him to yell, But if it weren't for All Might. I would have lost you." Holding her body close to him, he quickly gives one back as well. After a minute, they withdrew, gathering their breath. Asking Suyu, "Honey, don't say that. No matter what happens, even if we're separated from one another, you won't lose me," she promised him. She grins at Izuku, who gently restores his smile while putting a palm on her cheek. "I'm not going anywhere." "Ribbit." Sue laughed as he said, "Thank you, Froppy. I promise you, I'll make this quirk as my own." Deku laughs as she cuddles in his palm and says, "Ribbit, ribbit." Shortly after, she became aware of something on the laptop. With his laptop resting on her lap, she questioned, "What's that?" "Oh," he says, glancing at the display. Suyu interrupts, saying, "It's videos of All Might over the years of saving." She clicks the top right corner of the screen and says, "Ribbit, no, not that, I mean this." A dance video is shown at the beginning, causing Izuku to gasp and flush. "Oh, it's nothing." He tries to put his hands over the screen. "Yes, indeed. I wanted to try a few power maneuvers in." Suyu's finger on her cheek as she looks at him causes him to pause. He said, scratching the back of his head. "Go ahead, hee." Midoriya laughed uneasily. "That really went apart on you, didn't it?" Izuku sighed when he asked Suyu with a smile. "A little. But you're simply gorgeous," he said, blushing and turning away. "I can't lie to you." Sue flushed as well, and she stared at the laptop, perplexed, before turning back to face him. Deku? You wanted to learn dance skills, but why?" she asks inquisitively. Izuku gives her a tense look before he sighs and gets up and kneeling in front of Suyu. He takes the laptop away from her and puts it aside, and he holds her hands in his, turning her face rosy red because he is so close to her legs because she is still sitting on the couch. I was going to ask you for a dance, he says, startling her, but with what happened at the USJ. He looks at her, slowly putting his head to hers, his face turning red as well. And since you were so tired, I decided not to. She interrupts him right away. I want to dance with you. Ribbit. Izuku looked at Tsuyu for a few seconds as she finished quickly and grinned. What did you say? He said in amazement. He asked in total shock, wanting to make sure he heard her right. I want to dance with you. She repeated with a giggle, standing up and grabbing Izuku's hand. Huh? When they stopped, Tsuyu turned and used her tongue to flick the light switch to turn on the lights so they could see better. Wait, Asui. No, we don't have to. I really don't want you missing out on your sleep. I'm worried about you, Izuku said anxiously. He gets up and follows her to the center of their living room. She said, Deku, just in case you had forgotten, I've already had enough sleep. I slept for over 3 hours at the UA, she assured him. I'll be fine, nurse office and a few hours here at home, so don't worry, I just want to dance with my boyfriend. Don't worry, I just want to dance with my boyfriend, she said, flashing a cute smile with her tongue protruding. Deku nods and laughs, alright, but let me put some music on. He goes to the laptop and searches through the app for good music, lowering the volume so that only they can hear it. The music was romantic, which made Tsuyu blush, and they exchanged glances. They were both a little shy, though Midoriya is shyer than her. As Izuku carefully puts his left arm around Tsuyu's waist, causing her to flush, they clasp hands. Are ready? As he asked, she felt his body close to hers, her breast pressing slightly against his chest. She nodded, putting her right arm around his back, feeling his muscles, and looking at him. Ribbit. Why yes. Sue replied, grinning at Deku, as they began dancing to the music. Maintaining eye contact, they held onto each other's hand and began taking small steps to the left and right for their slow dance. During the slow dance, they began to spin around a little in the middle while maintaining their balance and looking into each other's eyes. When they did this, they blushed. She's so beautiful. Midoriya thought, then saw Asui resting her head on his chest as she told him to break the silence during the music. This is my first dance, I never had anyone dance with me before. She confessed, even at my junior high prom, I didn't dance with anyone. Tsuyu's face showed sadness, and she felt Izuku stopped moving, which confused her. Ribbit. She noted the surprised expression on his face as she looked up at him. Asui. He started. Why didn't you tell me this earlier? Holding her nearer to him, he asked. As they continue their slow dancing, she cuddles up to him and says, oh no, don't worry about it, smiling. I actually didn't want to go to prom since I preferred visiting you on the beach while you trained with All Might. Deku looks down at her as they do another gentle twirl. Still, I would have gone to the prom with you. I would even skip one day of training for you. They were silent for a moment before he said, you know what? She looks up at him. Ribbit? I'm taking you out on a date tomorrow, he informs her. Not just any date, I mean we could go to a restaurant, and you could wear a dress and I could wear a suit. Deku grinned at Asui, but he could see that she was staring at him in disbelief. A ribbit? Tsuyu croaks with a blush making Izuku yelp, realizing he might have went too far. Oh, I'm sorry. What I was trying to imply was that we could visit the beach, yes and She interrupts him. Deku. Calm down, I actually was surprised since. Tsuyu pauses his sentence as she takes his hands in hers. Since it would be our first time going on a date together. She blushes, looks away, then looks back at him. But yes, I would love to. Ribbit. Her boyfriend sighs with relief and smiles back, calm now. That's great Asui, and yeah it would be our first time. He says, leaning in close until their faces are an inch apart. But at least I'm going out with the most beautiful girl in UA. His girlfriend croaks, her face turning red, and he laughs before they slowly kiss on the lips. They then pull away and continue their slow dance for a little while longer, careful not to step on each other's feet as they pretend it's their prom night. They're both happy, but especially Izuku, who is excited about his date with Tsuyu tomorrow. To be honest, all of this has made him forget about his nightmare. Deku? He turns to face Asui. Yeah? He asked, and got a response. I can't wait to see you in a suit tomorrow. Tsuyu laughed, and Izuku blushed red all over before they both laughed. They were about to kiss and carry on dancing when Tsuyu's phone rang, leaving them perplexed who would call Sue at this hour. And she pulled away from their dance, walking to their room with Deku right behind her, picking it up and looking at it while sitting on the bed. "Ribbit. It's my mother," Asui said in shock before looking at Midoriya, who only smiled and gave a nod, letting her know it's okay to respond to her mother. She gives a nod back before pressing the call button. "Mom?" When she called, she held the phone up to her ear and heard her mother inquire whether she was okay following the events at the USJ. "Yes mom, I'm okay." Asui's mother and father both sighed with relief, and Asui's father shared with her how anxious they and her siblings were upon hearing the news. "I know what you mean. Ribbit," said Asui, now listening to her parents tell her something important while Izuku leaves the room. He does so to give her some privacy while he turns off the lights in the living room, the music of his laptop, and the laptop itself. Once everything was off, Izuku returns to the bedroom. Seeing Asui still on her phone with her parents, not wanting to interrupt the conversation, he walks over and sits down next to her, wrapping his arm around her, making her blush as he hears her mother ask if that's okay. They hear her father question, "But are you sure you're all right?" After Suyu nods and says, "Sure, I won't mind." "Ribbit," she informs him, croaking. After telling them she was fine, her mother said, "That's good. Don't worry, I'm okay," she said, smiling at Izuku. Thanks to Izuku. "Okay, Mom." "Ribbit ribbit." Suyu nods. "Now, honey, get some sleep, baby. Goodbye. I love you." They respond, "We love you too." She groans and hangs off. "Is everything okay?" As she cradles him, she tells him, "Yeah, they were just checking up on me after what happened at the USJ. They're really worried about me, so they want to come over tomorrow to see me," she says, referring to Midoriya, who looked at her with concern and held her up, causing her to croak in surprise as he sat her on his lap. "They'll be here around 7 p.m. She taps her cheek with a finger, startling Midoriya at first, but he smiles after realizing that loving parents always worry about their daughters, especially after what happened. He recalls his mother, Inko, crying uncontrollably after picking them up hours ago after they recovered. She interrupts him, saying, "That's fantastic, Asui. I'm so excited to see them and, wait, Deku, what about our date?" "Don't worry," he said, smiling and kissing her cheek. "I was planning we go out at 9 or 10 p.m. since it would be the best time to go." She asks anxiously, and she'll admit that she really wants to go on a date with him since it will be their first time, but she also wants to see her parents. This made her croak with joy and slowly nestle her head on his chest. "Ribbit ribbit." He gives her a hug in return and kisses the top of her head. "Thank you, Deku. Welcome, Froppy." The principal and the teachers wanted the students to have a little break after what happened, especially after two of their teachers were hurt in the attack and are currently recovering, so they closed UA. Izuku holds her close, and they are both happy and fortunate that there is no school tomorrow or the following day. Suyu pulled away after they hugged, looking Izuku in the eyes, and she did the same before kissing him, which caused him to kiss her back. Through it, Izuku stood up gently while holding Suyu, then laid her on the bed with him on top of her as they started taking off their clothes and started making love again, with both moans and croaks being heard throughout their apartment during the night. Early in the morning, Izuku woke up, sat up, opened his eyes nonchalantly, and yawned. He glances around, then gasps as he realizes he's not in his room. Startled, he thought, "What the?" and glanced around the room before focusing on the side of the bed he wasn't on. Huh? Upon closer inspection, he realizes it was Suyu. She was sleeping with her frog pillow in her arms, naked beneath the covers they used. It took Izuku very little time to recall his whereabouts. "Oh right," chuckles Izuku as he thinks. He smiles as he carefully reaches out and rubs Suyu's cheeks with his fingertips, feeling her smooth skin. "We're in our own apartment." When he sees her stir, he quickly pulls away and cuddles up to her pillow, still snoring as she croaks in her sleep. "She's so beautiful." With a sigh of relief, Izuku says, "Ribbit. Ribbit." He smiles at Suyu and says, "For a second I thought she was waking up." He still recalls what occurred to Suyu at the conclusion of the USJ attack, so he says, "But I shouldn't wake her. She needs her rest." Asui is given a gentle peck on the cheek by Midoriya, who reflects, after what happened yesterday when she couldn't move from exhaustion. As he was ready to get out of bed, Asui's arms encircled him, causing him to yell as he was carried back into bed. "Get all the rest you need, Froppy," he muttered. She cradles herself against Midoriya, kissing him on his cheek, neck, and chest, turning him red. Asui kissed him and he laughed uneasily. "Stay in bed, Deku. Please?" His reaction is both charming and odd. "OOS sure Asui B, but are you okay? You seem happy?" "Perhaps because her family is here today," He has never seen Asui so joyful. After stopping her kissing, Asui nestled her head beneath Midoriya's chin. As she said, "Ribbit ribbit. I'm okay. Sorry," she looked up at him and said, "I just wanted to sleep in your arms just a few minutes, please." He smiled, his blush showing more, but he could feel her naked body against his beneath the blankets. He said, "Oh, sure," and then turned to face the clock. He looks at her and smiles, saying, "It is 8 a.m. I guess we could sleep a little more." He soon notices that she has fallen asleep. Putting his head on the pillow and closing his eyes, Midoriya thought, maybe one more hour of sleep wouldn't hurt. He then fell asleep with Asui cuddling in his arms. An hour later, Izuku opened his eyes slightly after feeling a kiss on his face and saw Tsuyu staring at him without realizing he was awake. She smiled and cautiously got out of bed before making her way to the drawers, saying, "So cute." She was about to open it when she felt hands around hers. Izuku pulled her back into bed, causing her to croak in surprise as he placed her on top of him and planted a kiss on her lips. She began to flush and gave him a kiss in return. Tsuyu asked as they withdrew after a minute. She puts a finger to her cheek and smiles. "Ribbit, I thought you were still sleeping? Did I wake you?" He pulls her tight. "Well, I did feel you kiss my cheek," he says. As she croaks, he smiles and says, "But I just want to hold you. And kiss you, my cute little Froppy." "Ribbit. Ah, Deku, stop it." She responds with a sweet smile as she gently separates from him only to be hugged once more. "Ribbit." Deku then presses Sue into another kiss, but she recoils. "Our Ribbit." Deku. "Wait." Sue attempted to say something, but Deku kissed her instead, making her laugh as he began kissing her chin and cheeks. Deku. Wait, she chuckled, attempting to respond, but he kissed her instead. Izuku drew back gently to gaze at her. He kisses her slowly on the lips, saying, "Sorry. You're my girlfriend, Instead, he smiles and says, "I wanted to tease you for a bit." Tsuyu croaks and kisses his nose. She tilts her head slightly and says, "Well, Deku, we can finish this later. My parents are coming over later, remember?" She asks, tapping her face while her partner nods. "I remember." He releases her, and she smiles as she protrudes her tongue and croaks as she leaves him. "Thank you, Ribbit." She's returned to his bed. As his hands moved from her sides up to her chest, Izuku climbed on top and lightly kissed every inch of her face. Ribbit. Deku, Ribbit. She croaked as Izuku began massaging her breast, muttering and laughing. To be honest, Tsuyu enjoys every second of what he gives her. She was soon perplexed as she felt him halt and withdraw. "Ribbit?" Tsuyu asks as he sits up, his face now flushed. He says, "Crap, Asui, I'm sorry," as she looks at him and blinks. Deku puts his hands over his face and says, "I don't know what's gotten into me, it's just. You're so cute and hot. I'm sorry." The truth is, he didn't know what he was thinking. He felt he was a fool for making Sue feel uncomfortable, but she cautiously sat up and turned to face him. Sue crawled over, kissed his cheek, and put her arms around him. Deku looks at her in disbelief as she croaks, her cheeks burning red. "Deku, it's okay, I actually liked it. You're not uncomfortable. But I shouldn't have done that." "Deku." Tsuyu interrupted, using her hands to grab his cheeks and make him gaze directly into her eyes. Her cutesy smile makes Izuku laugh uncomfortably. "It's okay. I'm not mad, plus you have a hot body too. Thank you." He grins, but he sees that she's staring down at his member and that he's still stern. Sorry." His blush returns as a result, but Tsuyu's laughter draw his attention. When she smiled at Izuku, he glanced at her in confusion and said, "Don't worry, I'll help you." After 10 minutes, Asui was in the kitchen now, chopping some vegetables and kissing her lips slowly as she recalled the flavor of her boyfriend's seed she had eaten moments before, laughing. "Ribbit ribbit." She grinned as she heard the door open behind her and turned to see Midoriya leaving the room in his blue trousers and black t-shirt. When he saw her, he grinned and went to kiss her, causing her to croak before returning the kiss. They looked at one another as they withdrew. Izuku said, "Thank you, Froppy." As he gazed at the dish she was preparing, she blushed and croaked. Tsuyu nodded as he said, "We should get everything ready, huh?" She shifts slightly to give him a better view of her cooking. "Ribbit, yeah, but I know what to make." Izuku nods and gives her a head kiss before assisting her with the pasta she is preparing with the vegetables. "Pasta. It's one of my family's favorites." Several hours later, Deku and Asui had finished preparing everything for her family's arrival at 11 a.m. Asui went to sweep and mop the floor after putting the food in the refrigerator so they could prepare it later, while Deku went to do the laundry. He was occasionally very humiliated to have to look at his girlfriend's underwear while putting it in the washer or dryer, but he was able to do the task. Before long, he returns to the living room and finds his girlfriend gone. He looked about before he heard her say, "Asui? Asui? I'm in here." Ribbit. He turns to find that she was speaking from their bedroom. He entered the room grinning but stopped when he saw it was dark. Huh? He enters and scans the room before spotting a familiar face in the bed. He exclaimed, "Asui?" As he saw Suyu on their bed, nude, clutching her frog cushion and using the TV remote to switch it on. She pressed the aforementioned pillow against her breast and whispered, "Sorry," with a shy tone and a slight flush. Izuku laughs and tells her, "I just wanted to see a movie before I fall asleep." He said worriedly, "It's okay. Wait. Sleep? You're still tired? Are you okay?" As he takes off his clothes to go into bed with Asui, her face lights up at the sight of his erection and six-pack. She responded with a nod. She croaks in sorrow as Midoriya joins her in bed and holds her in his arms, allowing her to slowly nestle her head into his chest. "I'm okay. I'm still not used to my quirk yet," she says. She stares at the film and goes on to say, "And I'm only feeling a little tired, that's all." Midoriya observes her and realizes that, similar to her, he is still unable to regulate one for all. "But I am getting better at it. I'm learning how to control my dehydration, but I still need to learn how to control my stamina." To grab Suyu's attention, Izuku said, "Hey, Ribbit?" He asks, carefully placing his fingers on her cheek. As Suyu cradles into Izuku's palm with her eyes closed and her tongue slightly protruding, Izuku smiles and says, "You will learn how to control your quirk, Asui. With more training, both of us will master our quirks in no time. Plus ultra style." When he says, Ribbit. Thank you, Deku." She smiles back at him. They both leaned in and gave each other a kiss on the lips, saying, "You're welcome." Izuku hugs Suyu close while kissing her, causing her to groan as her breast presses against his chest. They looked into each other's eyes as they soon withdrew. As Izuku asked, Suyu said, "Thank you again." As they watch the film, she cradles in his arms and asks, "For what?" The words, "I love you, Deku. Ribbit," made him laugh. "For helping me get everything ready earlier for my family." Shortly after he hears her croaking, he says, "It's no problem. I love you too, Froppy." He notices she fell asleep as he glances down. Izuku grinned, used the remote control to turn off the TV, and then lay down on his pillow while cradling Suyu as he gradually drifts off to sleep. Later on in the day, Izuku woke up, sat up, and yawned. He looked at his desk clock and saw that it was 6:38 p.m. He pondered, "Wow. We've been asleep for nearly the entire day." He looks down to see Suyu still asleep, croaking as she breathes. It doesn't matter as long as she's well rested, he thought with a smile. He didn't want her to be asleep when her relatives got there, so he said, "I should wake her up now." He moves in to give her a kiss by pressing his lips to hers. Asui opens her eyes partially to try to see who was kissing her, but when she realizes it's her boyfriend, she gives him a kiss in return and holds him close until they break away. Ribbit. She yawns, which makes Midoriya laugh. "Morning to you too." "Well, actually it's the afternoon." Asui sits up and rubs her eyes while giving him a soft nose kiss. She smiled at him and said, "What time is it? My parents should be coming soon." She then got up and went to the drawers to retrieve her clothing. He glances at the time and says, "It's 6:40 p.m. as." Ribbit. Sue interrupts Deku. In a panic, she hurriedly pulled on her clothing, looking and sounding astonished. "Deku, we've been asleep for almost the whole day?" she exclaimed. "At any moment now, her parents will arrive. We have to get everything in." Ribbit. She interrupted, but Deku calmed her by holding her in his arms and kissing her head. He then reassures her, saying, "Asui, it's okay. We still have 20 minutes before they get here." He laughed, and Asui croaked and sighed as she nestled into his arms, resting her head on his chest. "Don't worry, we just need to get dressed, heat up the food and we're all set. I'm sorry. I just worry how my parents and siblings will react once they see me. They've been so concerned since the USJ attack." She glances at Izuku, who smiles while gently massaging her cheek, causing them to flush. They both laughed a little before kissing each other on the lips. "Don't worry, everything will be okay. My mom worries about me all the time whenever we go to school." Suyu said, "Thank you, honey," as she tapped her cheek. "Now let's get everything ready before they get here, Ribbit." Izuku gives a nod. "All right, I'll get dressed." He was still naked, but his girlfriend was already dressed in a dark blue shirt, dark green shorts, and shoes. As she watches Izuku get dressed, Suyu gives him a cute little smile and says, "Ribbit, Ribbit." He was a little bashful and anxious about it, but he doesn't mind. After a short while the two put everything on the dining table, dressed, and warmed up the food they had prepared earlier. After finishing, they heard someone knock on the door. Suyu, who was a little anxious, exclaimed, "Ribbit. They're here." She felt Izuku's arms encircle her. She glances at him and says, "Hey, it's okay," as he goes on. She blushes and smiles as he kisses her head and says, "Remember they're your parents, they're worried about you." She approaches the door and stops, saying, "Okay, Deku." She inhales deeply, then reaches for the knob to open the door, displaying her siblings, Samadare and Satsuki, as well as her parents, Beru and Ganma. "Mom, Dad, Samadare, Satsuki," welcomingly exclaimed Suyu. They yelled, "Suyu," and then embraced her. She returned the embrace. The family broke the embrace, but not before Deku grinned at this touching moment. Before Ganma inquired, Beru said worriedly, "Are you really okay?" Asui tells them, together with her siblings, "I swear if those brutes hurt you." They sighed in relief as she reassured them, "Mom, Dad, look at me, I'm okay." She then turned to smile at Deku. She mumbled the final line so that only she could hear it. "Izuku was with me throughout the attack, Ribbit. He made sure nobody laid a finger on me. Nor an entire hand." Izuku noticed and grinned as the four of them looked at him. Beru said, "Hi, Mr. and Mrs. Asui, Samadare, and Satsuki. It's great to see you again." She then says to him, "Izuku. Thank you so much, Ribbit. We were concerned that Suyu might have been injured. Or worse." Ganma croaked as he nodded. "I thought I was going to have a heart attack until we were informed she's alive." He turns to Suyu. "If anything were to have happened to our little girl, I would have fought to get those villains a life sentence." "Dad," Asui said, blushing with shame at the name her father had given her. He saw that her sister and brother were focusing on Izuku as Satsuki spoke joyfully. Samadare nods in agreement with his sister, "Thank you for protecting Suyu." "Ribbit." Izuku grinned and said, "Yeah, we thought those bad guys hurt her." He comforted the two, "You're welcome, I wouldn't let anything bad happen to your older sister." Following their reunion with Asui's family, the four began to detect a pleasant scent in the air that they were accustomed to. As he, his wife, Samadare, and Satsuki looked at Suyu, who nodded and croaked, Ganma questioned, "Is that pasta?" Beru smiles at her daughter and says, "Izuku and I prepared some food for you because you were coming over." Then, with curiosity, she queried Izuku, "That's nice of you too." He shook his head, asking, "Are you going to be joining us?" Beru and Ganma exchange glances as they realize what Izuku is getting at. "I'm actually going to be with my mom next door. Suyu and I want to spend time with our family, especially after what happened yesterday." After the USJ attack, every parent must be concerned about their children. As Suyu takes them and her younger siblings to the dining room, Ganma says, "We understand." Beru nods in agreement, and she turns to face Izuku and tells him joyfully. He smiles back at her and says, "I'll see you after we're done." He then departs their flat to visit his mother, saying, "I'll see you then too." A few minutes later, Izuku is currently having dinner with his mother, Inko, in their flat, allowing Suyu to spend time with her parents and siblings. They were contentedly consuming some of the spaghetti they had prepared. Before he went, he packed plenty of it in a big container. Naturally, Izuku isn't eating much of it because he wants to save space for his date with Suyu after her family departs. It's incredibly delicious. Inko smiled and said, "It's nice to have Asui's family visit her." Her son spit out pieces of his food, coughed a little, and flushed when she said, "But why didn't you want to stay over with them? I'm sure they would like you there. After all, it is your mother, father, brother, and sister-in-law." Mom, we're not even married, not yet anyway." Midoriya says, dropping his red-faced food, "He's marrying his girlfriend? Would she want that as much as he would?" His mother laughed, but he's not sure whether she would. She started crying as she said, "Sorry honey, I'm just so happy that my baby is growing up so fast." He laughed and informed her, "Mom, it's okay." He grinned and carried on eating, saying, "Besides it's really too soon for that. Asui and I are taking things slow." Midoriya blushed and said, "But I kinda want to." His mother nodded. Izuku interrupts, blushing self-consciously. Yeah, just take as much time as you need, honey. Plus you do need to make a nursery room if Asui gets preg. Mom. After a short while after finishing his meal, Izuku began to lie down on the couch. He is unsure of how long Suyu's family will remain there, but it doesn't bother him. After the USJ attack, he is glad that her family is supporting her. He soon sighs as he looks at the ceiling and yawns as he considers it, his eyelids becoming heavy. He hears his phone vibrate on the table and picks it up, saying, "Man, I'm tired." When he turns on the screen, he sees a text message from Suyu, and he smiles as he hits the notification button to read the text. He was shocked to see that it was a picture of Asui embracing her brother, sister, mother, and father. He chuckled and began texting something for her, but he eventually nodded off and fell asleep, leaving his phone on the floor and unable to respond. Afterwards the voice shouted out to him, "Deku." Izuku groans as he tosses and turns in his sleep. "Deku." The voice spoke once more, causing him to sit up and hold his head. He sighed and said, "Ow. My head hurts. But why? Ribbit?" he asked, startled by the recognizable croak. Ah. He almost toppled over the couch when he saw Suyu crouched on the floor next to it, staring at him while placing a finger to her cheek. Izuku sighed with relief. He chuckled uneasily before stopping when he saw the anxious expression on her face. "Asui, you scared me." Again. Suyu got up and sat near to him as he worriedly asked, Hey, are you okay? Is something wrong with your family?" As she put her palm on his head to take his temperature, she worriedly asked him, "I'm okay, nothing's wrong. My family left a few minutes ago, but you didn't text back when I sent you a photo. I thought something was wrong, so after they left I rushed over here but I saw you sleeping. Are you okay?" Izuku sent out a sigh of regret for not bidding her family farewell. The confused Suyu croaks, "I'm okay. I was just a little tired is all and—" "I'm sorry," she said. "For what, honey?" Izuku interrupts, saying, "It's okay if you didn't reply, you were—" He sighed and then yelled, "No, not that, I didn't say goodbye to your parents and siblings, I'm sorry." As he blushes scarlet, Asui slowly drops to his knees and sits on Midoriya's pelvis, smiling at him. Before croaking, she said, "Deku, it's okay. My family really likes you very much. There's no need to worry, okay?" She smiles with her tongue protruding in a cute way, making Midoriya smile, hold her in his arms, and kiss her on the lips, causing her to croak and return the kiss. "Ribbit. Besides, after I told them everything you did to protect me at the USJ and saving me from the villains, they were so happy for you." To her surprise, however, he gets up and holds her up bride style. As Sue put her arms around Deku and held him close as he walked to the door, they continued kissing until he drew away from her. Wait. He glances around the living room, but he doesn't see his mother. He asks Sue, who was staring at him, "Where's my mom?" She grinned as Deku said, "Oh, she went to bed early, she has to work in the morning, Ribbit." They blushed because it was going to be their first date. "Oh. Then, in that case, let's get ready for our D-date." As Deku opened the door and left his mother's apartment with Asui still in his arms, he took her back to his and her apartment to prepare for their date, and Sue croaked, nodding, "Ribbit." However, he is unaware that Sue was wearing a frightened expression while resting her head on her boyfriend's chest, recalling something she couldn't stop thinking about from the USJ. Shigaraki, the villain, nearly reduced Deku to ashes because he was defending her. Speaking to himself in the mirror, Izuku stated gravely, "Come on, Deku. You need to make the best date for Asui." While Asui was in the bathroom getting ready and sighing, he was in the bedroom. As he adjusted his green suit and bow tie, he asked himself, "Why am I talking to myself in the mirror?" Not because it was hot, but rather because he is anxious for his first date with his lover. He is perspiring a lot. Izuku inhaled deeply and pondered. Then he heard the door open and said, "Just relax, I'm sure everything will go okay." "Right, Asui?" he asks, smiling as he turns to her. The sight of his beloved in front of him caused his cheeks to flush brightly. "Are you ready to go?" he said. He couldn't believe what he was seeing. Suyu was wearing a green sundress that reached her ankles in the skirt, had a light green belt around her waist and shoulder straps, and had a small green bow tie tied in her hair on the back of her head. She flushed and turned away when she saw her lover staring at her. She blushed and said, "What do you think, Deku? I'll like it." Izuku inhaled deeply before responding to her, then approached her while holding her hands in his and maintaining eye contact. "Asui." He smiles warmly at her. She blushed brighter and croaked, "You look so beautiful." As she dusts off his tux, she glances at it and says, Thank you. You look nice. Suyu responds with a smile, laughing as he taps her finger against her face. Izuku looked at her and said, thanks. He was about to move in for a kiss when she interrupted, confounding him. Wait, Suyu said first. I have something for you. Ribbit. She approaches their bed and pulls out a box from a drawer adjacent to it. With a raised eyebrow, Midoriya said inquisitively, what is it? He truly had no idea because he respects her privacy. Asui extracts a rose from the box. Remembering how sweaty and muscular Midoriya was while exercising on the beach where she first saw him, Asui grinned with red cheeks and said, last night I told you I never went to my junior high school prom, but instead I went to see you train. Which I loved every moment of. Shaking it off, she got up and approached him. He gasped when he looked at her hands and saw that she was clutching a Budinya diaresis Re. Izuku looked at her with wide eyes and exclaimed, Asui. He was shocked that she had managed to save that all this time. Why didn't she tell him, though? The rose was green and white, and he saw her placing it on the left side of his tuxedo chest. Suyu looked up at him and said. Izuku gasped and waved his hands around as she said, I was saving it in case we go out on a date, Ribbit. I know it's not prom or anything but still. She briefly smiled before turning to face the floor with a mournful expression. Hey no, don't be sad. I like it, I'm happy you've been saving it in. Sniff. Asui looked at him with tears in her eyes and wiped them away. Midoriya paused. She puts her head on his chest and gives him a slow hug, making him grin and give her a hug while kissing the top of Asui's head. Ribbit, no. It's not that, I'm just happy to have you in my life. Ribbit. As they continue to enjoy each other's embraces, Midoriya sobbed, and I'm happy to have you in my life, Froppy. Afterwards the two had taken a taxi to get to their date spot after leaving the apartment complex. As his arms around her and held her, Sue was leaning against Deku and cuddling up to him. The restaurant he planned to take her to was 10 minutes away, so they weren't even conversing. Deku nodded and smiled as the driver drove them to the location and inquired, so you kids heading out somewhere tonight? He blushed uneasily as the driver laughed and continued to drive them to their destination. He. Why yeah. Deku soon discovers that Sue hasn't spoken since they got into the taxi. As he looked down at her, he saw that she was sadly staring down at his hands. She didn't answer when he said, hey, you okay? Her lack of attention disturbed him. The words, Asui, hey, Asui, at last caught Suyu's attention. Izuku notices something is disturbing her as she glances at him and asks, huh? Ribbit? To gain some solitude, he closed the small window separating them from the driver. He then took her hand and held it tenderly. Izuku began by saying, hey, talk to me, what's wrong? You've been acting differently ever since after the USJ. If you want we can cancel our... Suyu interrupts him halfway. When Suyu turned her head away from him, he smiled and held her cheeks tenderly before kissing her nose, which caused her cheeks to flush. Ribbit. No Deku, nothing's wrong. I want to go on our date, really I do, it's just I'm nervous. That's all. Izuku then calls her a... Ribbit. He smiled and she smiled back, giving him a passionate kiss on the lips. Asui, it's okay. I'm nervous too. After all, it's our first date. He smiles through it and gives her a kiss in return. They quickly separated to gaze at one another, and then she slowly cuddles up to him. Izuku then gives her another kiss on her hair and leans back while the driver takes them to their destination. But without Izuku, Suyu saw only anguish, gloom, and sadness inside her head. He notices but keeps her close to him as she progressively grabs his hand tightly and won't let go. Afterwards, as the cab reached the stop, Midoriya joyfully pointed out, we're here. Asui blushes as Midoriya quickly exits the cab and helps her out by holding her hand. Asui blushed and said, thank you, Ribbit. This made him laugh. He was going to pay for the cab when the man held up his hand and said, welcome. The driver grinned and responded, no kid, it's on me. This confused the boy. The driver stops him, saying, what? Really? But, I really don't. Midoriya was taken aback as he waved goodbye to the two and drove away, saying, kid, it's okay, really. Have fun. He grinned and glanced at Asui, who had a finger on her cheek as she studied the restaurant, which is part of a big complex of stores and eateries. Startled, Suyu looked at Izuku and questioned, what is this place? She blushes as he holds her in his arms and asks, you've never been to Oishi Ryori before? She looks down, cuddling warmly in his arms, and says, and no, I've never been to any restaurants actually. Not with anyone. This is my first. After hearing everything she had to say about the taunting and mockery she had endured, Izuku sighed and slowly knelt down to match her height. He smiles at Suyu and kisses her cheek, making her grin a little. Hey, don't worry. I'm here for you, there's no need to be sad. Plus, it's my first time here honestly. You're not alone. Thanks, Deku. Ribbit. Asui gives Midoriya a hug, and he gives it back. They enter the restaurant together, holding hands, after a little while. Asui giggled when Midoriya, acting like a gentleman, opened the glass doors for her. Thank you. They enter and observe the interior of the Oshi Ryori, also known as Delectable Delights in English. The Oshi Ryori's exterior is composed of black and beige bricks, and it has large windows that let customers see both the inside and the outside. The interior features white and green tiles on the floor, tastefully painted tan walls, a wooden ceiling with hanging lights, booths near the window, and a radio on one side for those who prefer to listen to music. Before long, the two notice a female waitress approaching them. Hello, and welcome. Would you both like a table for two? The happy waiter said. Before he could respond, Izuku saw Suyu closely hugging his arm. He saw that she was shy and turned her head away from the female waiter, which made him grin. The waiter nodded when he held out 2 fingers and said, Yes, table for 2 please. She walks them to their seat and says, Right this way. They see that there are a lot of people here, and none of them appear suspicious. All of them are simply regular people having a nice supper. Izuku became a little confused while he was going because he could feel Suyu's arms encircling his arm more tightly. Soon after, the waiter escorted them to their table, a windowed booth with a pleasant view of the outside. Su was ready to sit down when he croaked in surprise. He felt Deku grab her hips softly and slowly shift her aside before he sat down first, getting as close to the window as possible before patting the seat next to him. He blushed a little and grinned uncomfortably, saying, Here Asui, next to me. She stared at him anxiously before sitting down beside him, her face flushing slightly as they felt their bodies touching. Izuku looks away from him toward the window, making sure that Suyu is well protected from it by his body. He wants her to feel secure and at ease since, following the events at the USJ, he is still worried that bad guys could strike at any time or place. Ah, how cute! The waiter said with joy as he handed them each a folded, rectangular card. Asui and Midoriya nodded as she left them alone, saying, Here are the menus and I'll be right back when you're ready to decide. Asui places a finger on her chin and stares up at her Midoriya when it's just the two of them. She noticed that Deku was staring out the window and said, Deku, what are you doing? Deku asks Su, What's wrong? Before turning back to the window and letting out a sigh. Nothing. He turns to face her and cradles her in his arms, causing her to stutter and blush again as he kisses the top of her head. She giggles as he smiles and says, Just want my girl safe and sound. Assuring him, Ah Deku, don't worry, she continues. He blushes and nods as she kisses his cheek and says, There aren't many villains around here, so don't worry, okay? Let's just enjoy our time together, Ribbit. Izuku laughed a little, embarrassed, and picked up his menu to see what he might order, but he stopped when he saw Suyu looking into her purse before taking out a face mask. You're right, sorry, just being overprotective is all. Izuku politely placed his hand on hers to stop her from putting it on. As Suyu looked at him, he smiled warmly and said, Hey no, you don't need to wear that. She looks down at her mask with grief and says, But, Ribbit. I don't want people making fun of me because of my face and mouth because of my frog quirk. Izuku then gently puts his palm on Suyu's cheek, causing her to turn to face him while he reassures her. He rubs her cheek and goes on, No one will make fun of you. Not as long as I'm here with you. Her cheeks turned entirely red when she heard the words, There's no reason to hide your face. You're beautiful. Ribbit. Ribbit. Thank you. Suyu smiles as she closes her eyes and cuddles onto Izuku's hand, making him grin. A flush came over his cheeks as he added, I love you. She reacted with a cute tongue out as they leaned in to kiss, but someone cut them off. I love you too. As they turned to face the waiter who greeted them, they both blush deeply crimson and move apart from one another. Ready to order? They ask. As Suyu looked at the menu, Izuku picked it up and said, I'll have. The waiter nodded, noting in her book, I'll have a tomato soup with a grilled chicken, a salad on the side, and a cola soda. She said, Alrighty, what about you? Suyu glanced at the menu for a few seconds before grinning at Izuku. He was quite perplexed when the server nodded and wrote down, I'll have what my boyfriend ordered. Wait Asui, are you sure? She nodded to him while he held her big hand, Ribbit. Izuku laughed at this. He grinned and Suyu nodded with a croak as they turned to face the waiter. Well, you could add jello, if you want. It is your favorite. The waiter nodded at him and asked, You have jello, right? When she walked away, leaving the two green-haired lovers alone once again, they gazed at one another and blushed. We sure do. Now I'll be right back with your orders, she said. Izuku brought Tsuyu's body close to him, causing her to croak and moan softly to escape attention while she wrapped her arms around his neck. They slowly leaned into one another and shared a kiss. Then, when Izuku softly inserted his hand beneath her dress, Tsuyu curled her tongue around his and tasted it. His girlfriend distanced herself from him after realizing this. Deku, no, not now. Asui's face flushed, and Midoriya's gasped as she realized what he was doing and withdrew from her legs. Sorry. Midoriya was interrupted by Asui, who placed her palm over his lips after observing that he was slightly raising his voice. Since everyone is eating and conversing, she checks to make sure no one has heard them. When she opened her mouth, she croaked. Ribbit, it's okay. Besides, she says, adjusting his bow tie before kissing him on the cheek. He grinned when he said, I want you to hold me. He cradles her in his arms as she clings to him and he kisses her hair, saying, Sure, you are my girlfriend. Afterwards, while the two lovers were enjoying themselves while they waited for their meal, Deku was concerned about Yue. However, now that everyone is aware of their relationship, he fears that they will divide the two in different classrooms, but Su has reassured him that this won't occur and that they would remain together in the class. Before shortly, the server brought them their order and Su's jello from the booth table. The server waved and smiled as she walked away, saying, tomato soup, grilled chicken, salad, and soda for the green couple. The two blushed. Enjoy. Izuku and Tsuyu exchanged a smile as the waiter departed, and they began to eat, savoring the food that had been brought to them. Tsuyu glanced at Izuku and back at her meal, and then she got an idea, so she sliced off a piece of her jello and picked it up with her fork. Deku? He asks, humming as he glances up. Yes, Asu. Then, startling him as he glances at her, she puts the piece in his mouth. As he began to eat the piece of jello, she smiled and said, Since this is our first date, I thought feeding each other would be romantic. He was silent for a time, which worried her. Dek. She looks at him and notices a smile on his face as Tsuyu surprises her by giving him a slice of Izuku's chicken. As they feed each other, she smiled back, That's a good idea, Asui. Using a spoon, Asui lifted a small portion of her tomato soup to Midoriya's lips, allowing him to take a silent drink. In exchange, he took a tomato slice from his salad and gently stroked it over her mouth, hydrating her lips before giving her the slice. Izuku laughed when Tsuyu said, Delicious, only he could hear. The music began to speed up and then burst into flames, surprising and frightening everyone, including Izuku and Tsuyu, as they were feeding each other. The client was sitting next to the radio, leaning back in the seat of her booth, and she had unintentionally placed her arm too close to the radio. When the previous waiter brought a fire extinguisher and extinguished the fire, the client yelled, Not again, as she attempted to do so with a fireproof cloth. The waiter smiles and says, Sorry. My quirk overcharges electronics if I don't pay attention. Oh, it's okay. Accidents like this happen here sometimes, plus we got some spare radios in the back. Izuku and Tsuyu resumed eating after the problem was resolved, confident that everything was under control. However, Tsuyu then turned to face her food with a mournful expression. She was thinking about One for All and how it breaks Izuku's bones every time he uses it, even if she was enjoying their evening. Is he capable of mastering it? What if he sustains irreversible harm? Or worse, death? She croaked in surprise as a tear landed on the table. Tsuyu felt additional tears welling up in her eyes and whipped them away with a napkin, wondering, Am I crying? She glances at Izuku and croaks, Asui. Surprised, he removed his tux jacket and wrapped it around her torso, asking, Are you okay? You've been shaking. Oh crap. Are you cold? Lying in the hopes that he would believe it, Tsuyu said, Ribbit? Deku, no, I'm not cold, just tired, but I'm okay. Izuku kissed her head and let out a sigh of relief. He grinned at her and said, But if you're too tired, let me know so I can carry you home, okay? Ribbit. She nodded and nestled into his jacket, feeling secure and warm. Izuku saw this and laughed, letting her keep his jacket on while he continued to eat. Tsuyu continues to ponder about him in her mind. A few minutes later, Tsuyu wanted to assist Izuku in paying for their meals after they had eaten, but he insisted since he had asked her out. After paying, they both leave the restaurant together, with Midoriya's arm around Asui's, who is still wearing his jacket. Since it's not too far, they decide to walk home. Suyu decided to walk with Izuku on the way home to the beach where they first met because she likes that area of the beach. He even insisted on carrying her, but she assured him she was okay. As the moon rises in the night sky, Izuku says, "Oh, okay. I just don't want you walking tiredly." Suyu looks up at him and puts a finger to her cheek. Izuku nodded as she reassured him with a phony smile, "Don't worry, I'm not that tired like before, I'm okay." With a smile, he teased Suyu with small cheek kisses that made her laugh. "Okay. Still I'll carry you if I have to, even if you say no, you're my cute froppy." "Ribbit ribbit," she said as they traveled till they reached the beach, which wasn't far because he always arrived here on foot with all might. As they strolled over the sand, Suyu put her arms around Izuku's arm and cuddled up to him, causing him to gasp in surprise and then laugh. They were observing the section of the beach where they could see some teenagers and couples. They soon came to a halt as they gazed at the stunning water, which was illuminated by the moon. Izuku said, "It's amazing, huh?" And Suyu nodded while glancing at the ocean and moonlight. She said, "Ribbit." However, she soon caught his attention by looking down with a hint of despair. To catch her attention, he worriedly said, Hey, are you okay?" Suyu looked at Izuku and said, "Ribbit, I'm okay." "Why?" Izuku replied. He said, "You look a little down," before posing the question. As Suyu asks, "Are you sure you're okay?" Izuku becomes more worried as he turns aside and looks down at the sand beneath their feet and the water that reached the coast. As another voice cut him off before he could finish. Izuku was drawn to the question, "Why is there a frog on the beach?" But Suyu was not. Huh. When he looks back, he sees a group of ladies who are either the same age as him or older and are observing them. Based just on their appearance, facial expressions, and absence of a mutant quirk, it is clear that they are the unlikable biased sort. Before he could speak, one said, "Hey boy, your tadpole isn't allowed here." A third person replied, but her voice was a little drunk. "Why don't you two leave so we don't have to look at her ugly frog face?" "Yeah. Or better yet, why don't you ditch her at the pond she crawled out of and come hang out with a real woman?" The group of girls glanced at their lone buddy who had caught the glares and said, "Yeah, what she?" "Wait, what? What?" Izuku, fed up with the taunting, started gazing at the group of girls and clenching his fist as a conversation between the women and the inebriated female started. He was enraged by the taunts directed at his fiancée copyright due to his appearance, and as he was doing this, the veins all over his body started to shine once more. Suyu, who was ignoring the women, took Izuku by the arm before he could even charge at the group, grabbing his attention. He said, "Asui." And she responded. As the group that was criticizing her began to quarrel over something, she dragged him back to their apartment complex and said, "I want to go home, Deku." Afterwards, unaware of what was happening, Suyu pulled Izuku all the way back to their apartment. He tried to speak with her again, but she insisted that she wanted to go home, so he let her pull him. Suyu led Izuku to the couch as soon as they had come upstairs to their apartment, unlocked the door, and entered before shutting it. She took a seat first, and he sat down next to her, watching her with concern as she gazed at her dress, which was kneeling in despair. "Asui." "Wah." She interrupts him. Suyu sniffed and started to cry once more. "Remember the day of the entrance exam? Where you used one for all and, she stared at him sorrowfully and inquired, "Broke your bones?" Izuku looked shocked. For what reason did she ask him this? Then he gave her a nod. When Izuku saw that Suyu was crying a little, he yelled and tried to comfort her by holding her in his arms. "Yes. Why? If you're worried if I'll break my body again, then don't worry, I'll be training hard in." Izuku stopped. She pushed him gently away from her while she looked at him tearfully. Hey, don't cry. I'm sorry, it's okay. There's nothing to worry, Ab." Her words interrupted him. Suyu closed her eyes and started to cry a little. "Our Ribbit. Since the day I saw you break your bones by using one for all I'm, Ribbit. I'm afraid of losing you. Not just by the villains but by All Might's quirk, Ribbit." Izuku is sympathetic to her feelings. He shares her fear of losing her and was frightened by those nightmares. He looks at her and sighs, "If that dream ever comes true, I wouldn't be able to live without her if I lost her. Asui I." She interrupts him once more. Izuku returned the tearful smile, but as she continued, Suyu's smile faded. "But at the USJ, when you protected me against Shigaraki, I thought you were going to die if he touched your face. Ribbit, I waited for you to turn into dust. But when I found out I was still in your arms I was so happy. But after you tried to rescue All Might, I saw you jump using one for all again. I got scared because you broke your bones again, but then, after Shigaraki reached for you, I tried to save you, but I thought was going to lose you if it weren't for our teachers showing up in time to save us. Tsuyu looks up at Izuku's face, which is filled with shame and shock. She said to him, I'm afraid of losing you. Her eyes started to well up with tears as she said, I don't want to lose my best friend. She started sobbing in her hands while making a few croaks. My lover. What if you end up dead? Ribbit, she exclaimed. Izuku felt terrible since he didn't know Tsuyu felt this way. I don't want you to die if another attack happens, he said. After thinking, Asui. He held her up and placed her on his lap before embracing her and letting her sob on his chest while rubbing her back and letting out some croaks. Half an hour later, after Midoriya reassured him, Asui soon began to relax a bit. She stares him in the eyes and notices that he is crying too. Asui. Please, look at me. With tears streaming down his cheeks, Midoriya yelled. I swear to you that nothing bad will ever happen to me. I'll not die. That's a promise, Asui. I don't want you to die either. But I'll try harder to make this quirk my own and I'll protect you. I promise. Asui looked at him while holding his hand in hers. Asui asked her lover, promise? She croaks and lets more tears slide down her cheeks before Midoriya gives her a strong hug. Promise me you won't die? She asks. He pulls her tight as she sobs once again. I promise I won't die, he says. Our ribbit. Thank you. Asui returned the hug, causing Midoriya to smile, and then plants a kiss on the top of his girlfriend's head. They continue to hug on the couch, grinning slightly and feeling secure in each other's arms, saying, You're welcome, Froppy. An hour later the two broke off their embrace and exchanged glances after cuddling on the couch. Izuku asked Tsuyu, feeling better? And she nodded. She smiles at him and he smiles back, lifting her up bridal style. Ribbit, yes. But I am a little dehydrated. Tsuyu croaks joyfully and puts her arms around Izuku's neck as he carries her to the shower, saying, Let's go and take a shower together. She asked him after entering the bathroom and setting the shower to the proper temperature. Please, help me out of my clothes. Izuku blushed at the thought. He nods and assists Tsuyu, removing his tux first, followed by her sundress, shoes, bra, and underwear. Oh, sure, he says. Izuku then takes off his pants, shoes, socks, tie, undershirt, and underwear, causing Tsuyu to flush as well because they are both now naked. After carrying her into the walk-in shower, he places her on the shower seat and then sits down beside her while the shower head sprays water on their bodies. Izuku asked with curiosity while glancing at Tsuyu. She responds, Are you okay now? To him. They leaned closer to one another and grinned at one another once again. Feeling much better, Ribbit. That's good. The two massaged each other's bodies with their hands before sharing a passionate kiss. She let out a little groan as Tsuyu felt every muscle in her body, from her hips to her breasts, including his pecs and abs. They smiled at each other and withdrew from the kiss, only kissing and caressing each other because they were both somewhat exhausted. Afterwards, after taking a shower and drying off, Izuku went to the bedroom and changed into his underwear and shirtless pants since Tsuyu had requested him to wait in their bedroom in the bathroom. He was confused because he didn't know why, perhaps because she desired privacy. Izuku looked at the door and then shook his head, wondering if she was okay. When he hears the bedroom door open, he looks and nearly collapses with a startled cry. No, she must be fine, she's rehydrated, nothing should be wrong. But what if she... He stops. He was astounded by what he saw. Tsuyu enters the bedroom, blushing and nervously turning her head away from him. She has her arms behind her back and is wearing a transparent nightgown that is a light and dark green color, revealing her light green bra and panties. Before being carried up, bridal style, by Izuku, Tsuyu said shyly, Ribbit. L like it. I decided to wear it for us since. Ribbit. You took me on a date. As he walked her to their bed and carefully laid her down, she croaked in surprise, Ribbit. He then gently got on the bed and kissed her on the lips, stunning her even more when she kissed him back and gave a little moan through it as their tongues twirled. Before long, they separated to gaze at one another. I love it, Izuku says with a smile. Smiling, Tsuyu says, You're so beautiful, Asui. Thank you, Deku. She smiles back, her tongue slightly protruding, and he laughs as they kiss once more before separating to exchange glances. Tsu made Deku hum before he questioned, What should we do now? With curiosity. She nods and smiles at him, saying, How about we watch a movie here before going to bed? It's still our date until we go to sleep. Deku gave Sue a nod and said, "Sure. Could it be a horror movie?" Before rising from the bed, he then said to her, "I'll go get popcorn and soda for us, also jello for you. Want to choose the movie?" "Sure, Ribbit." Suyu went to the movie shelf beneath the TV and looked for a horror film when Izuku left the bedroom to get the popcorn, soda, and jello. He quickly found one called Rahab, which is an underwater horror film based on a 20-foot humanoid sea monster that wreaks havoc on those who are unlucky enough to pass through the ocean. Izuku returned with the food and beverages, lying next to Asui and giving her a bowl of jello while holding the cup of soda and popcorn between them. This looks scary. Suyu put the disc inside the video player and lay back in bed with the remote. You picked a movie. After Midoriya read the movie she had chosen, Asui croaks and shows him. Rahab, that's a good horror movie. They exchanged a smile before starting to watch the film together and enjoying it with their snacks, but Izuku wasn't paying much attention. He was unable to do so because of Suyu. Despite the darkness and the soul light coming from the TV, he could still see her bra, underwear, breasts, and hips underneath her nightgown. At that moment, Suyu saw Izuku examining her body. "Ribbit!" She giggled as he yelled and turned away, his cheeks flushed. She thought, adorable, when they watched the film. Several hours later, in order to avoid disturbing anyone in the apartment complex, Izuku started to turn down the volume a little as the horror film was coming to a close and was portraying the final struggle between the humanity and the monster, Rahab himself. However, as he did so, he began to hear snoring. He asks, glancing down and to his side to discover that Suyu had dozed off. Izuku laughed a little as she croaked in her sleep, "Ribbit! Ribbit!" Izuku shuts off the DVD player before shutting off the TV itself, saying, "I guess it's time to go to bed." Then, being cautious because Suyu is lying next to him, he places the empty cup and the two bowls that contained the jello and popcorn on a table to be used tomorrow. Izuku then gently cradles Suyu in his arms so as not to wake her. As she puts her arms around him and rests her head on his chest, she mumbles in her sleep, "Good night, Deku." Izuku grinned and gave Suyu a head kiss as a result. "Good night, Asui." After enjoying their first date, he yawned quietly and relaxed, gradually beginning to nod off as well.
I will continue the story in next part. Till then, bye bye.